Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all three of you. Judge Pinnell, you are a political activist, aren't you?
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. I am a judge on the Washington State Court of Appeals. I don't consider that to be a political activist.
Okay. In 2020, you and 10 of your friends issued a written statement. You entitled it, quote, Statement on Racism, White Supremacy, and Justice. Here's what you said. I'm quoting from you now. Racism and white supremacy currently plague every social, educational, economic, governmental, and legal system. Racism and white supremacy currently plague every social, educational, economic, governmental, and legal system in our state and in our nation. And they have for centuries. Both, you're referring to your state and America, both target Black, Indigenous, African American, Latinx, and other people and communities of color, resulting in entrenched inequality and inequity, manifesting in unjust, unfair, and differential treatment, and yielding remarkably disparate and negative outcomes relative to those experienced by white people. End quote. Did I read that accurately?
Senator, I don't have it in front of me. I don't have any reason to think that you did not read that correctly.
Okay. You are very active in Planned Parenthood, are you not?
No, Senator.
Okay. Well, Planned Parenthood, in its annual reports, lists you as a, quote, silver friend, close quote. Do you know what a silver friend means?
I don't, Senator.
That's someone who has donated between $1,000 and $2,500 to Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington and North Idaho. That's in the Planned Parenthood annual reports. You don't know anything about that?
I don't recall. What I recall, Senator, is that my husband had donated to Planned Parenthood, and I think at some point in time they listed me along with him, but I believe that was a donation.
This is you.
Okay.
And in fact, they say that as of 2018, you've been a donor for at least 10 consecutive years. Is that right?
I do not recall donating them for the last 10 consecutive, 10 years before 2018 or 10?
That's as of.
I don't recall, Senator.
Okay, you don't remember. Okay, let me ask you, you're on the Court of Appeal. Let me ask you about a few of your cases. Do you remember a case called State v. Westwood?
I believe so, Senator.
And you were reversed in that case, weren't you?
Senator, in reviewing my cases, I think I've been reversed in about 2% of the cases that I've issued. I've issued almost...
Were you reversed in that case, though?
That was a very complicated case regarding sentencing law.
But I'm going to run out of time, and I got a bunch of these.
Okay.
Were you reversed?
That might have been one of the 2% of the cases. I think so.
Reversed?
I believe that was one of the 2% of cases,
Do you remember
Senator.
a case called Personal Restraint of Heiress?
That, I think, was the case regarding whether or not the person had been deprived.
Were you reversed in that case?
That was, I think I was not reversed.
Were you reversed in that case, counsel?
Senator, I think that I wasn't reversed as to outcome, but it was one of the 2% of the cases where the state Supreme Court disagreed with the analysis.
Do you remember a case called Parental Rights of ALK? Were you reversed in that case?
Senator, I think that was one of the 2% of my over 450 cases where there was a reversal.
Do you remember a case called State v. Log Bomb?
I recall that case, Senator. That case.
Were you reversed in that case?
That was one of the 2% of cases. I issued an opinion to affirm a conviction, and the state Supreme Court overruled that and reversed.
You remember a case called State v. Barboza v. Cortez? Were you reversed in that case?
Senator, that case is not coming to mind. Again, I've issued over, myself personally written over 450 decisions.
You remember a case called State v. Telvik?
Senator, I think I recall that name. That might have been one of the 2% of
reversed
cases.
in that too?
That might have been one of the 2% of cases,
Okay.
Senator.
Another case, Hendrickson v. Moses Lake School. Were you reversed in that case?
Senator, I recall that case. I think that might have been one of the 2% of cases where the state Supreme Court disagreed with the analysis of another appellate court.
Were you reversed?
State.
You remember a case called State v. Curry? Were you reversed there?
Senator, I think you're reading off all the cases. I think that's one of the 2% of cases.
Okay. How about a case called Estate v. Rathbone? Were you reversed?
That's probably one of the 2%, Senator.
How about a case called Douglas v. Shamrock Paving Company?
Senator, that's a case where I was largely affirmed. The only thing that was a reversed, I included everything, even if it was just a partial reverse. The only thing that I was reversed on was an award of attorney fees. The substance of the law, which was rather new in that case regarding what constituted an investigation for an environmental cleanup.
So you weren't reversed?
That part of it I was affirmed.
Yeah, I think that would be a surprise to the Supreme Court that you weren't reversed.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
I'm out of time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
For the record, what is 2% of 450?
I think it's about 11 cases, if memory serves, 11 to 12 cases of the cases that I've written, many of which are grappling with really novel issues. And so that's what happens.
11 out of 450?
Over 450 that I've written myself.
Senators should be so lucky. Senator Booker?
I haven't been right 98.
For
Yes, Senator.
those who want to read them. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Lopez, I appreciate your work on human trafficking. I was so disappointed looking at your sentencing record that you would go light on those criminals. Those of us who work in the human trafficking, child abuse areas, it is so disheartening to see judges who practice leniency on these criminals. Ms. Campbell, it's nice to meet you. You and I have never met, and Senator Welch, said the White House said we had interviewed her. We've never met, and no, we did not interview her, so we may want to correct the White House record on that. Ms. Campbell, have you ever been a judge?
No, Senator.
Do you mind using your microphone? And so you have no experience. You have appellate law experience, but no experience as a judge.
Senator, I have argued numerous times before the court.
Okay, but you have no experience as a judge. I want to go back to the Tennessee Bar Association. When your nomination was announced, and by the way, this was a deal that was worked out before the vacancy was ever announced. We heard about it from plenty of people in Nashville, that this is exactly what was going to happen, that the deal was done. And I'm sure you're probably aware of that. Weren't you aware of that?
Senator, I was not.
Okay, the Bar Association does note your work for workers' dignity. Did you ask them to correct that, since you've said you never worked for them?
I have not asked them to correct that.
Why did you not?
I wasn't aware that it said that.
Oh, so the TBA Law blog is sent out, and you read it. I assume you read it. And did you note the inaccuracy? And did you ask them to correct it? Did they issue a correction? Please respond.
Senator, I do not recall reading that blog.
You don't recall reading it. So this deal was so cooked that she didn't even look at what the TBA Law blog had to say when the nomination was announced. Let's go to this support for Odessa Kelly, and we've discussed that several times today. You've never been able to say why you chose to support her. And you were tagged in a Facebook post with her. So there is a reason you chose to make your largest political contribution ever to Odessa Kelly. And we have a list of tweets, Mr. Chairman, things that Odessa Kelly has said about this committee, positions that she has taken. So why would you choose to support Odessa Kelly when you knew what her opinions were? Because when people say things like that, it's not only in a tweet. We've got it on Facebook. We have it in other instances. So would you like to provide an answer on that? Senator Cruz asked you about that, and you never could say why you supported her. Do you align with her politically? Do you agree with her? Do you think that we are aligned with the devil? What would cause you to be right out there with your best political support and contribution for her?
Senator, as I said, I'm not familiar with those statements. I do not support.
So you never heard her indicate anything. What did you think you were supporting? What kind of agenda were you supporting when you supported her?
Senator, again, I'm not familiar with those particular statements.
You have to have, every candidate has a political ideology. Why would you give that support for someone who has made such statements? And let me ask you, go back to the workers' dignity, that work that you've done. Do you agree with them on abolishing law enforcement, abolishing ICE?
Senator, I'm not familiar with those statements, but I can categorically say to you that I disagree with those positions.
So you would not abolish ICE. Okay. The Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, and we have discussed this, and you're saying, I want you to say this for the record. So you are saying that they are lying when they say that you gave them advice and consent and help. Is that correct?
Senator, the manifesto that was referenced, I am not familiar with it.
So why would they think that they had depended on you for advice? And why would they note this? Did you ask them about it? Did you say, why are you referencing me and I had nothing to do with this? Did you talk to anyone?
Senator, until today, I did not know that my name was listed in one of their publications.
You had no idea about that. Well, do you agree with them? And I'm pulling this from a Fox 17 news report. TIRRC is calling on Metro Police to develop clear policies and refuse to help ICE carry out civil immigration enforcement in Davidson County. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that statement, and no, I don't agree with it.
You don't agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your 2023 U.S. Attorney Investiture speech, you highlighted the challenges you believe America faces and what justice means. You said, quote, "We're experiencing a long overdue reckoning with racism in the criminal justice system." Mr. Ritz, what part of the criminal justice system needs a long overdue reckoning?
Senator, what I was describing were a number of things that have happened in recent years in this country that framed, I would say, in some ways, the work that we do in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Is the American justice system systematically racist?
That is not a sentiment that I hold. To the degree there is a definition of what being systematically racist means, I understand some individuals have pointed to disparities in sentencing and that type of thing, but that's not a view that I have.
So that's not a view that you have. That was your testimony. Well, you also said, quote, there cannot be one rule of law for people who look like me and another for people of color. That sure sounds like the view you just said you didn't have. Do you believe that's our system, that our justice system has one rule of law for people that look like you and a different rule of law for people of color?
No, what I said is that absolutely we cannot have one rule of law for people who look like me and another for people of color. We cannot have one rule of law for the powerless and another for the... There's just one rule of law. That's what I said.
You also said, when asked if the criminal justice system is systematically racist, you said, quote, there are structural barriers and disparate outcomes that communities of color experience in our society, separate and apart from any individual's views or intentions. Now, that again seems to be saying the same thing that you're saying you weren't saying. I'm just trying to understand what your views are.
And Senator, that was my attempt in that written question to grapple with, again, what was being asked by systematic racism. I understand some have pointed to structural barriers and disparate outcomes.
So what are the barriers and outcomes you're referring to?
I can think of one prominent example that I've had some experience with, which is the disparity in cocaine sentencing between crack sentencing and powder sentencing. This body has addressed those disparities on multiple occasions, and that has been, as I understand it, something that people have addressed as a result of disparities.
Okay, you also said in responses to questions for the record that as the Attorney General has explained, everyone has implicit biases. So what are your implicit biases?
Senator, I understand implicit bias to refer to unconscious bias that exists below the level of consciousness, and so to the degree I have implicit biases, I think we all do. I think that's partly the point.
So everyone's a racist whether they know it or not?
And I would say that everyone might have implicit biases, and I don't know what.
So what's the difference between bias and prejudice?
I think there can be a lot of overlap in those things. It depends, I think, on the context.
So you're saying everyone is prejudiced?
That's not what I said, Senator.
You just said everyone has implicit biases, and you said that bias and prejudice, I think your words were, there's a lot of overlap.
I think that's right, and I understand implicit bias, and I'm not an expert on the subject, to refer to a set of biases that may exist under a conscious level. So,
since you talk about these implicit bias issues, have you taken a so-called implicit bias test?
We received training that was put on during the last administration in our office on implicit bias. I attended that training in our office.
And what did you take a test?
I don't believe there was a test associated with that, Senator.
Okay, you also said, quote, but you should know that for justice, for me, is about more than putting people in prison. For me, it's also about who votes and how hard it is to cast that vote. It's about where pipelines or bus routes go. Justice is about whether people in all zip codes can get a loan, whether women have access to health care. That's an interesting statement, and in reading it, what's striking is that that's de-emphasizing the core role of a U.S. attorney. The last I checked, a U.S. attorney is not in the policy business of deciding where pipelines go. That's the role of environmental activists and left-wing activists, but is not supposed to be a U.S. attorney. Why was your focus elsewhere?
Senator, and the very next thing I said was that those are not issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the U.S. Attorney's Office, where we are primarily focused on enforcing criminal laws. I was seeking to place justice as a broad concept at the center of, to place our work within justice as a broad concept.
So do you agree that Memphis is one of the most dangerous cities in the nation?
It is. We have an intolerable amount of violent crime, and that's why there's no higher priority for us in our office.
Well, there's no higher priority except for pipelines, except for bus routes, except for bank loans, except for implicit bias, except for the fact that everyone is prejudiced. All of those other things are what you're focused on talking about instead of actually locking up bad guys who are murdering and raping and hurting people.
In those same comments, Senator, I said that we don't apologize for seeking significant prison sentences, and that's at the core of what we do. When we have serious violent crime, we seek serious sentences and consequences.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruz, and thank you, Mr. Ritz. We appreciate your being here. You may receive some questions in writing. If you'll respond in a prompt fashion, we'd appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We now make room for the second panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, I have some questions for you. Thank you for being here. You authored the controversial, I would say, Task Force 1 Navy report. Is that right?
Yes, I was part of the lead there, yes.
Okay. I want to ask you a few questions about that. So on page 33, it recommends including a, quote, cultural framework questionnaire tailored to individual minority candidates for the Naval Academy. What does that mean?
So I don't have it in front of me right now, Senator, but I would share that basically what we started looking at was a whole of person criteria to look at young folks and make sure we can open our aperture and look for more talent and look the talents of all those willing to serve our nation.
So does that mean that there's a different application based on somebody's race?
No, Senator, and to be clear, we are a warfighting organization. Our most fundamental duty is to support and defend the Constitution and to support and make sure we can take care of the safety and security of the American people. That's what we're about. We're warfighters, right? So that's what this process is about, to make sure we can build readiness.
Well, I would agree with that. On page 40, I'm honestly trying to understand what some of these terms mean and how it would apply. I don't think any of this stuff has been implemented yet. Is that right?
Most of the results from the Task Force 1 Navy report was rolled into the Culture of Excellence campaign. If you look at the recommendations, there are words like explore, review, and then the Navy took a look at it and they decided what they wanted to use, what they could help to build warfighters. And so basically the Culture of Excellence, which is about warfighters and the foundation, is what's left over now of the Task Force 1 effort.
Okay. On page 40 of that, you recommend that we consider the use of diversity stamps on minority applications. What is a diversity stamp?
Actually, that was from before. There used to be a case of diversity stamps. I'm not sure if that was the exact recommendation. I don't have it in front of me right now. So. Okay.
I guess the idea then of whether it's in there, I want to make sure I understand if it is the idea. What is the thinking behind a diversity stamp?
So, Senator, I would share with you that I'm reminded of the words "e pluribus unum," out of many one. That's who we are. We're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation of people serving together. There's so many of us today who are looking for opportunity to serve, and they want to serve our nation and do what's best for all of us. And so I think, again, the Navy was looking at a way to find out who people were. To be quite honestly, after 2 years in Carrier Strike Group Command, I was asked to lead this effort. I did not ask for it. I wanted to do it. But I think I was selected to do it because of my character, my reputation, my professional.
Well, listen, I admire your career, and I really do thank you for your service. My concern is, and this is not the first time I've asked on this kind of topic when people come before and have been, their name has been associated with some of these ideas. I do think it's incredibly divisive, right? To be, whether it's a quota or it's just dividing the room by immutable characteristics. I just don't think it has anything to do, or it has no place in our military. I really don't. And I do think we should be active in reaching out to a broad group of people to serve. I don't disagree with that at all. But, when there's things like recommendation 5.4, which is to counter hate speech, who decides, who's the arbiter of what's hate speech in this recommendation?
That is decided by the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Okay. Would referring to white people as bubbas be hate speech?
I don't know about that.
Well, that's part of the problem. I mean, Derek Chollet, who's President Biden's nominee to be Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, that's what he said in 2020. So I don't know, is he disqualified? Is that hate speech or not hate speech? So this is what I'm getting at. Like, I don't understand what a lot of these terms even mean, and certainly not how they would be applied. And you know, you authored this report, so I'm honestly asking for some explanations about how this would actually work.
Again, I think, Senator, the Navy took the report, they looked at it, and they'll decide how they want to go forward with it. As I said before, if anything out of it, they wrote it to the Culture of Excellence 2.0 to look at how to build warfighters.
Okay, well, we may follow up with some additional questions on this, because I don't know what a quality assurance check means. I don't, like, anyway, I appreciate your service. There's just a lot of questions about this report that I have, which I hope you can appreciate. I'm not alone in this. I think we need to do everything we can to make sure, to ensure that our armed services and our military is the great meritocracy it should be. And my concern is that you start dividing people up, or you know, this obsession with with race is not good for us. It's certainly not. I don't think gets us further down the road. I think it's hurting recruiting. I firmly believe that. So I appreciate your time here today.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Sullivan.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Chairman, if I defer to Senator Black, can I keep my place in line?
The rules of recognition on the Republican side belong to the Republican senators, and I would certainly honor whatever you would agree to among yourselves.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mathis, you have a lovely family. And these children are so well behaved. They're going to deserve a special treat at the end of the day. Mr. Chairman, I do want to say for the record, the White House is being inaccurate in their representation of their outreach, and I think that that is important to note. And you were correct when you said the Trump administration reached out and worked with you on both district and circuit courts. And that advice and consent is vitally important, and the White House is being inaccurate in their representation of their outreach, which did not occur until 4:55 yesterday afternoon. Mr. Mathis, I want to talk with you a little bit about your experience, because I am concerned about how little experience you have as in appellate litigation when you're asking us to confirm you for a federal appellate court. Have you ever argued a case in the Sixth Circuit?
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for that question. I've argued 10 appeals to the Tennessee Court of Appeals and the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals.
But not to the Sixth Circuit.
But I have not argued an appeal to the Sixth Circuit.
Have you ever argued a case in any federal appellate court?
Senator, I have not argued any cases in.
And then we'll talk about briefing, because I want to know about the federal appellate cases where you served as the lead attorney for briefing, and I don't mean just serving as local counsel. On how many cases have you been the lead appellate counsel handling the substantive briefing?
If I'm not mistaken, I handled the substantive briefing as the lead drafter of appeals in 3 appeals, as well as the current appeal that I have before the Sixth Circuit.
By our records and what we have found, your name appeared on briefs in the Sixth Circuit 9 times, 9 cases. And in 8 of those cases, you had to file corrected filings for failure to follow the Sixth Circuit rules. 8 out of 9. So how can we expect to confirm you as a Sixth Circuit judge when you have demonstrated a record of consistently failing to comply with the rules of that very court?
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for that question. For any court that I'm practicing before, I do my very best to follow the rules.
So those were just mistakes, 8 out of 9 times?
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for that question. At this juncture, I don't believe I've handled 8 appeals to the Court of Appeals. I've handled 5 to conclusion, as well as 1 that I have pending before the Sixth Circuit.
Well, what we found is in some of the Sixth Circuit cases where you were involved, you handled the state and federal trial work, but an attorney from another firm was brought in to handle the appellate work at the Sixth Circuit. So what that says to me is that your own clients didn't trust you to handle the appeals before the Sixth Circuit. So they brought in somebody else to handle that Sixth Circuit work. Another question for you. Before this hearing was noticed, did anyone ever suggest to you that you should reach out to me or Senator Haggerty for a meeting?
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for that question. I recall that in June, I was advised to make myself available to you.
And you chose not to do that?
Senator, I did make myself available and interview with your counsel as well as Senator Haggerty's counsel.
Who counseled you to not make yourself available for a meeting with me?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I was never counseled to not have a meeting with you. I was happy to meet with your counsel in June.
Okay, I know that you were made aware of my desire to meet with you after you were nominated. Are you telling this committee that no one ever told you that I wanted to have the opportunity to meet with you?
Senator, I was not aware of a request to meet with you, but I would be happy to meet with you.
I know you were made aware, and I know for a fact that you were made aware of my concerns about your lack of experience, and that was well over a month ago. And I think it's of concern that you would have chosen not to reach out and close that loop. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Hirono is on, I hope she's on board here.
Ms. Lopez, is that right? Lopez, I'm sorry. Okay. Speaking about sexual abuse of children, you were a judge in State versus Smith. He was sentenced, he had 12 charges of sexually abusing 2 minors, 1 4, the other 9, to a 12-year sentence with 6 years suspended. Are you familiar with that case?
I am, Senator.
According to public reporting, and the prosecution asked for 15, is that right?
Senator, my recollection is that I imposed the exact sentence that the state asked for in the Smith case.
We don't have it that way. According to public reporting, Judge Limp sentenced a man convicted of 12 charges of unlawful contact with minors. The defendant would rub his fingers in a circular direction in and on the vagina of each child, and he did so repeatedly. According to public records, you said, people are complicated. I have frankly been offered very little insight as to how or why this happened. What I can say is that this is a very tragic situation of a person who has a lot of good in him, having done a very reprehensible thing to 2 young children, causing extreme damage. What was the lot of good?
Senator, in that case, the bulk of the time at sentencing was spent describing the damage that the defendant had done and how reprehensible his conduct was.
You cut his sentence, you suspended half of the sentence. Is it your testimony that's what the prosecutors asked for?
Yes, Senator, I did just review their sentencing memo, and that is my recollection.
We'll check and see. If I'm wrong, I apologize. You presided over a case where a mother was charged with manslaughter, killing her 14-month-old baby by exposing him to fentanyl, enough in his system to kill 4 adults. Her house was being used as a fentanyl distribution center. There was enough fentanyl, the whole room was covered in fentanyl. you sentenced the mother to 4 years in prison because you concluded the mother acted with criminal negligence, but not recklessly. You don't think it's reckless to expose your child to fentanyl enough to kill 4 adults and to have the house the child lives in to be a distribution center for fentanyl, packaging and selling fentanyl?
Senator, the sentence I imposed in that case was 10 years. I reviewed a great volume of evidence, and what I concluded is that she had
4 years in prison. Did you suspend it?
Senator, it was 10 years. Under Maine law, for those charges, the only way to impose any supervision conditions upon release is to suspend a period, and it's a required part of the Maine sentencing structure.
Could you have imposed more? What was the maximum sentence?
The maximum sentence for manslaughter, Senator, is 30, but it's 0 to 30, and criminal negligence, that was a case of criminal negligence. That's the least culpable type of
So
manslaughter.
if you said you ruled out reckless, would that have given you more sentencing authority?
Senator, that would be a more culpable type of manslaughter.
So you believe that it was not reckless for a mother to use the home the baby is in as a crack distribution center, exposing the child to 4 times enough fentanyl to kill an adult, 4 times to kill an adult?
Senator, the evidence showed that she was threatened into...
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Chair recognizes.
Quite confused about this ethics issue or issues. So maybe you can just help me sort it out. So I don't think I maybe understand the facts here. So you said that you've never been subject to an ethics complaint before. Is that right?
I said, to my knowledge, never been subject to an OPR complaint or any sort of formal complaint.
Okay. I'm looking at a letter from May 16th, 2010 to the Office of Professional Responsibility that reads, "This letter is a formal request that your office investigate matters pertaining to the fair dealing and, more important, honesty of Assistant United States Attorney Kevin Ritz."
If that letter exists, Senator, I was unaware of it until just now.
But you're aware of the issues surrounding the Von Rico Weber case, which is the subject of this letter asking for a formal investigation into you. You're aware of that?
As I said, I do have some recollection of that matter.
Oh, okay. So you were subject to a complaint. I have the letter right here. Let's just try to figure out what's going on in this case. I mean, this was a case involving a public defender who you got a plea agreement with, and then she asked to withdraw as counsel because she said you misrepresented the situation to her, and the court granted her motion to withdraw as counsel. That's pretty unusual, isn't it? I mean, what's happening here? She said that you told her that she relied on information about the nature of the crime, which was, she was told, was going to be a marijuana trafficking offense, and then when she got the PSR, it had a base offense level of 34 because the underlying offense was cocaine trafficking. So she had advised her client, based on your representations, here's what you're going to be likely subject to. They accepted the plea deal. She looks at the PSR, and it's something very different, she says, than what you told her. Now, this is a public defender now. And so on that basis, she had to withdraw as counsel, and the court granted her request. That's very unusual. I mean, what happened here?
Senator, first of all, I believe it was not a public defender. It was a defense attorney on the CJA panel in West Tennessee. There was a written plea agreement that was entered into. That written plea agreement, as with all of our plea agreements, includes a provision that says these are all of the promises made to this defendant by the government.
Yeah, but neither the indictment nor the change of plea transcript nor that agreement says anything about the underlying crime. It just says funds were the proceeds of distributing controlled substances without any specification of the alleged illegal narcotics. So what she says is, you sandbagged her, basically.
And that's not true. I made no such promise along those lines.
But was there any indication before the PSR that you were going to hit this guy with the cocaine? I mean, this is unusual. It's unusual to be a Democrat administration nominate somebody who is accused of, who's hated by federal public defenders, and who's accused of sandbagging indigent defendants. So I'm baffled by this. I am totally baffled by this. So I'm trying to figure out what in the world happened. And then you got taken off this case, I think, right?
My recollection, Senator, is that the office had someone else handle it in case I needed to be a witness at a proceeding.
Well, here's what Vivian Donaldson, who is the counsel who ended up representing the United States, at Ms. Chastain's motion to withdraw as counsel, here's what she said. These allegations about you are serious. That's one of the reasons I am here, meaning in court, and Mr. Ritz will more than likely be taken off this case because of these particular allegations. So did that happen?
And I believe it was in case I needed to be a witness. But
Well,
those allegations.
this is what your supervisor said in open court. I'm not quoting you now, a private letter. I'm quoting you something from open court. She says you were removed from the case because of the allegations, which she says were very serious. Now, you've represented this committee. You knew nothing about all of this. You answered a question in the committee questionnaire that you weren't aware of any complaint. You weren't aware of any disciplinary committee. You weren't aware of any inquiry ever. But yet, I'm reading you a transcript from open court in which your supervising attorney says the allegations against you are very serious and you're going to be removed. So I have to tell you, I don't think I'm trying to figure out what in the world is going on here, because it doesn't sound to me like you've been very forthcoming, certainly to this committee. So what happened? Were you removed because of the allegations of improper behavior?
The allegations were false, first of all.
I'm not asking you about your view. I'm asking you about what you told the court and about what your supervising attorney told the court.
And I don't recall exactly why there may have been a change in counsel.
Mr. Ritz, don't you think you'd want to, don't you think that's kind of important information?
These allegations were false, and there was never a finding.
You have a clear memory of that, but you don't have a clear memory of what happened in open court and you being potentially removed by your supervising attorney. This is very bizarre, I have to say. I've never seen it quite like this. This is very, very strange. And I just noticed that we have a sudden instance of amnesia anytime we're dealing with the actual ethical complaint, but you seem to remember the case exceptionally well. So this troubles me, and it's strange. It's very, very strange. Maybe my Democrat colleagues can clear this up. I'm sure they've vetted you. This is very, very odd. So your testimony is you weren't removed. All of this was false. You were never investigated, and this what? This all went away? Or what happened?
There was certainly no court finding or any other finding by an investigative body of any unethical behavior.
I thought the court then allowed this defendant to change his guilty plea. He pled guilty, and then the court allowed him to withdraw it. That's also very unusual.
It does happen from time to time, Senator.
On the basis of your misrepresentations.
And that was not the finding of the court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Ritz.
Thank you, Senator.
I want to direct my questions to Secretary Dalton. You have mentioned in your opening statement that you promise to timely account, in a timely manner, account for information. You want to provide information to this committee. That is a statement about what you intend to do. But I think what's been brought out in this committee thus far is you haven't done that. And so when you're before this committee for a promotion, all we can do is look at your track record, and that isn't your track record. And on an issue that, by the way, is not some footnote in a white paper, we're talking about the border wall that has been the topic of much conversation in this country for a long time. And I know you have your prepared statement, and I find it perhaps more alarming that your response is, you keep saying it's not in your portfolio. With all due respect, you're the assistant secretary for this, actually for Homeland Defense. And that doesn't cut it. I can't, so in Missouri and most places in the country, $130,000 is twice the amount an average family makes in a year. Under your watch, we were paying to store these materials $130,000 a day. In any other time in this town, prior to now where the news cycle is so fast, that would have been a scandal. But the idea that we're just supposed to wish this away now by saying it's not under your portfolio falls short. So either you knew and you didn't do anything about it, or you didn't know, which is what you're saying, until the letter came before you, and then you engage in your fact-finding mission, which perhaps is more concerning. And then after that, in the letter you say, well, we're mitigating those costs now. It's not $130,000 a day, it's $160,000 a month because we're selling this off. So to add insult to injury, by one account, one contractor One company was able to purchase $4.4 million worth of steel tubes for just $156,000. Do you think, ma'am, do you think that's a good deal for the taxpayers?
Senator, you have my commitment for any resources that fall under my portfolio that
Well,
I
no,
will be
okay,
as
forget
steward
about your portfolio, what's in your portfolio. We've established that you don't take responsibility. I'm asking you, is that a good deal for taxpayers?
No.
Okay. And so now we're in a situation, and by the way, it's worth pointing out too, in the auction of these materials, it has been reported that they are purposely not to be referred to as anything related to Trump, Mexico, or the controversial border wall. So I think it's important for the American citizens to understand that this is being described to contractors on this auction, I guess, that they are referred to as steel tubing and sticks for industrial construction. Ma'am, do you think that is obfuscating what's happening here? Of the selling off of these materials, to not be honest about what's actually happening?
Senator, I did not write the way that that was described, so I would have to defer to those that did. I believe that we need to provide transparency, certainly to Congress and to the American people, on all matters related to national defense.
So I think in my limited time, I just want to say, it's not personal, but I think what you're gathering from the tenor of these questions, you are being nominated for the #2 civilian position at the Department of Defense. That has enormous responsibility. And the idea that everything that's bad, or on such an issue of that is high profile, the American people want our border to be secure. They also want us to be good stewards of their tax dollars. Neither one of those things are happening. It's sort of the worst of all worlds. And now this administration is actually, I guess, starting to construct a border wall, parts of it. But the idea that your unwillingness to sort of account for this and take responsibility, to me, is a much bigger issue. Because there's going to be something that happens where this committee and the United States Senate or Congress has to rely on you being forthcoming. You've shown that you won't be. Take responsibility. You've shown that you won't be, in a very dangerous time. And you were charged with a very important job that had to do with our southern border. And your response time and time again was, I have no responsibilities here whatsoever. And that's unfortunate. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Rosen.
Ms. Campbell, I'd like to start with you if we can. According to FEC reports, the largest donation that you've made to a candidate is a $1,500 campaign contribution to Odessa Kelly, candidate from the Tennessee 7th Congressional District. Does that sound right to you?
That seems accurate, yes, Senator.
Now, look, this candidate, Ms. Kelly's made some pretty crazy statements. Are you aware of those?
Senator, I suspect that some of the statements you're going to ask me about were after her candidacy, and no, I have not. I don't follow her on social media. I don't have Twitter, so.
All right. Well, you don't have Twitter, but look, she made some really awful statements, including the following tweet just 4 days before, not after she was a candidate, not before she was a candidate, while she was a candidate, and just 4 days before you contributed to your campaign. Here's what it says. Like Cory Booker said, hashtag Ketanji Brown Jackson, God has got you 100%, because Blackburn, Cruz, Cotton, Graham, Hawley are obviously aligned with the devil. Apparently I'm not. Be great, black woman, be great. The hate is real, the racism is apparent, the disrespect is on another level. Now, this tweet, which is a public statement, attacked some members of this committee, a lot of members of this committee, as being, quote unquote, aligned with the devil. What does that mean? I mean, do you agree with Odessa Kelly that members of this committee, the members that are mentioned in this tweet, who happen to have opposed Justice Jackson's nomination. You agree that that means that they're racist, that they're the devil? Would the same apply to those senators who criticize Justice Clarence Thomas, or to those who voted against his confirmation when he came through this committee?
Senator, I am not familiar with those statements, and I do not support them.
Okay. I understand that, and I understand that you're not on Twitter, but this is a candidate that you donated to. Now, I'm willing to assume that that's not the only crazy statement she's made. And in fact, it's certainly not. On January 11th, 2022, only a few months before you contributed to Odessa Kelly, she tweeted, quote, "Let me make this simple. 41 million people in the U.S. and the USA ID as AA/BLK, and their ability to have fair representation is being decided by 52 white people in the Senate, including Tim Scott. 48 Republicans plus 2 Ds. That's insane." Now, I don't know what that means by white people, including Tim Scott. I think Tim Scott would probably take exception to that. How is this tweet calling out our black colleague, Senator Tim Scott, how is calling him white not racist?
Senator, again, I'm not familiar with that statement. I have no affiliation with that statement. I don't know what some of the acronyms
Do you share those
in
views?
that statement
Do you
mean.
share those views?
No,
any of them?
Senator, I do not.
All right. Now, according to your AVO profile, you've been legal advisor to an organization called Workers' Dignity from 2013 to the president. Is that correct?
Senator, I have never represented Workers' Dignity. A long time ago, I was on a legal advisory board
Yes.
to help them.
So you have
get
been a legal
started.
advisor. You have been a legal advisor to the.
How come you didn't tell me that?
I apologize, Senator. I have never represented Workers' Dignity. I was on an advisory board about 15 years ago when they were starting.
Okay, and when did your work for Workers' Dignity end?
I'm sorry, can you
You talked about that it was a long time ago. When did it end? When did your work for them as a legal advisor end?
Senator, I would guess in about 2012 or 13.
All right. Now, according to your AVO profile, on June 12th, according to that profile, you authored an endorsement for an attorney named Raquel Lee Bellamy on June 12th. So, at the least, you should have been aware that your AVO profile listed that you were currently a legal advisor to Workers' Dignity. Were you aware of this?
I was not, Senator.
You were not aware of the fact, even though June 12th. Now, June 12th, that's just a week ago yesterday. Tell me what I'm missing here. Because you authored an endorsement for an attorney named Raquel Lee Bellamy on June 12th. So, were you not aware that your AVO resume listed that you were currently a legal advisor to Workers' Dignity?
Senator, I believe it's been more than a decade since I looked at my AVO profile, and so I was not aware that it said that.
More than a decade or more than a week? Which one?
I have not looked at it. Are you suggesting June 12th of this year?
Yes.
No, that is incorrect, Senator.
Okay, but you can't tell us when it ended. You haven't told us really when it began or when it ended. A minute ago, you didn't acknowledge to Mr. Grassley what was going on, so I'm a little confused. I'm about to be gavelled out. I'm out of time, but this raises some questions. It also raises some questions. Your largest political campaign donation went to someone who has made blatantly racist comments and really wildly inappropriate comments about almost every member of this committee, and I find that troubling.
Thanks. Can I, first of all, welcome. Glad you're here. Wish you well. This is a bit of an...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ritz, you are a political activist, aren't you?
I would not consider myself that at all, Senator.
Okay. When you were sworn in as U.S. Attorney, you gave a speech, didn't you?
I did.
Okay. Here's what you said. I'm going to quote from your speech. But you should know that justice for me is about more than putting people in prison. For me, it's also about who votes and how hard it is to cast that vote. It's about where pipelines go. It's about where bus routes go. Justice is about whether people in all zip codes can get a loan, whether women have access to health care, whether citizens have affordable housing or clean drinking water. Sometimes those are Department of Justice issues. Sometimes they are not. But for me, they're all justice issues. Did I read that accurately?
I believe so, Senator.
Okay. Did you really remove the Tennessee state flag from your conference room?
Senator, I appreciate you asking about this again. As the chief federal law enforcement.
Welcome. Did you do it?
So I felt it was fundamentally inappropriate when I gave press conferences and similar statements to the public to indicate or suggest somehow that I spoke for the state, which I don't under our system of federalism.
Are you embarrassed to be from Tennessee?
Not at all, Senator. I am from Tennessee, grew up as a public school kid in Tennessee.
But you were embarrassed to have the Tennessee flag.
That's not it at all, Senator.
Okay. You have a history of lying to your professional colleagues, don't you?
That's not true, Senator.
Okay. Do you know a former public defender named Stephen Shankman?
I knew him to a degree. I'm not sure we ever had any cases together. I knew who he was, yes.
Well, in a private email, not meant for public consumption, to another one of your professional colleagues, this is what Mr. Shankman said, talking about your lying. He said, "It is unfortunate that this is not the first, second, third, or whatever occasion that this sort of thing has occurred. But everyone should be aware of this unfortunate pattern of behavior. You should be aware," he said to the other lawyer, before the other lawyer dealt with you. "Your client should be aware, and you should proceed with extreme caution." Was Mr. Shankman lying?
To the degree he suggested that I acted unethically, that was not accurate, and it wasn't in any occasion, much less on numerous occasions.
Okay, let's talk about this case, United States v. Von Rico Weber, which you claim to not remember. But before I do that, a few seconds ago, you lied to Senator Hawley, didn't you?
I'm under oath, Senator. I did not lie.
You said you have no knowledge of any complaint, professional complaint made against you, didn't you?
I said I have no knowledge of any sort of formal complaint, and he read from a letter that I don't believe I ever saw.
And you were shocked. You
If
never heard of that before.
If there were a formal complaint, that, as I said, I had not known about that.
Okay. You were amazed.
I don't recall any of that.
Any.
I recall this Mr. Weber's
You have
case.
amnesia about it.
Again, I am unaware of any formal complaint or investigation. Certainly was not.
You believe in the Tooth Fairy?
Senator, I don't.
You believe in the Easter Bunny? Now, in this case, United States v. Von Rico Weber, you lied to the defense counsel. And the defense counsel then had to go before the court and withdraw a plea for his counsel. And a complaint was filed, about which you apparently have amnesia. And the Justice Department replaced you. And the lawyer from the Justice Department who replaced you, this is what the lawyer said. The new attorney said about you. Said these allegations against Mr. Ritz are, quote, serious. And it is taken so seriously, referring to the Department of Justice, by our office. That is one of the reasons I'm here, and Mr. Ritz will be more than likely be taken off this case because of those allegations. End quote. You lied to Senator Hawley, didn't you?
I didn't lie to the defense counsel in that case. I didn't lie today, Senator.
Now, my good friend Senator Ossoff asked you if you'd follow the law. And you said, yeah. But if you're lying to us today, we're stuck with you, aren't we?
Senator, I have not lied and did not lie in that case.
You just have amnesia.
I did not lie in that case. There was a written plea agreement with the entire agreement of the parties.
If you believe that, you believe Elvis is alive and running a small bait stand on Lake Erie. Shame on you.
Mr. Ritz, I asked our staff here who review all sorts of nominees' qualifications and backgrounds, how it would be possible that someone could file a complaint against someone and they didn't know it. They said it is not uncommon at all for OPR to decide not to act on that letter of complaint and not to proceed with it and not even to notify the person accused.
That's my understanding as well, but again, yes.
We think that's a fact. So this notion about amnesia or whatever it may be, it is credible, at least possible, that exactly as you portrayed it, they never notified you. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Ritz, for being here. I really appreciate
I
it.
can see you many, many times over in good health and in happiness. Thank you. We know that as we celebrate Hanukkah here, I'm reminded of a thought that I said at the Capitol a few days after 9/11 when we came together for a memorial service. And I said that there's a piece of shrapnel in every American heart. But the soul of America is even stronger than our heart, and we will certainly recover. There's a piece of shrapnel in every Jewish heart. And until all of the hostages are released, I heard one of the little girls say, bring them home. I say, let them go. They did nothing wrong except wake up as Jews in Israel. And for this, they were killed. They were tortured. They were taken into captivity. They were molested and abused. And their lives and those of their families were ruined, thousands of them. And last year, when the second gentleman was with us, I was asked by the White House whether there will be any family members of hostages here. And I said, there will be thousands, because everyone who will be here is, in a sense, a family member of a hostage. But I think there are 7 billion family members of hostages, because every decent human being cannot rest while this is going on. And our joy is not complete until we see every single one returned, and those who are alive in good health. I believe that when this menorah was first lit in Lafayette Square, it was done because it was an answer to the call by the Rebbe to increase in Hanukkah celebrations. And my father, from whom we'll soon hear, applied for a permit and was denied. So he went to see someone at the White House who was the domestic policy chief for President Carter at the time, and told him of the dilemma. So he called the Secretary of Interior and he said, look, either you're going to approve this menorah permit or I'm going to go to the president and get your permit for your tree yanked. So I recommend that you do it. The permit was approved. And it was in the middle of the hostage crisis in Iran in 1979, where our fellow American citizens were held. And President Carter, for the first time in, I think, 100 days, walked out of the White House together with his domestic policy chief, Stuart Eisenstadt, who has since served in so many distinguished government positions. I can't even remember them, but over 50 years he's been ambassador and undersecretary and deputy secretary in various administrations, and is now the chairman of the Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I see sitting next to him is Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, who was the first Senate-confirmed official of the United States government to combat and monitor anti-Semitism. And I would like actually for Ambassador Eisenstadt, if you wouldn't mind, to stand and wave to everybody so they could say hello. Every year he stands up and sees the big crowd and starts to think about all the trouble he caused back then when he was a little younger and decided to stand up for what was right. Look what you've spawned, thousands and thousands of celebrations that have copied this. I also want to mention that we have a special guest, Mr. Paul Abate, who's the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, who has also exerted unbelievable efforts in combating hate and anti-Semitism across America. And he's obviously sitting next to our special guest from the administration, Secretary Mayorkas, who will be introduced shortly. But first, as Jewish people and as Americans, we have to remember that we have with us Aviva Siegel. Aviva Siegel was a hostage in Gaza, and she was freed, thank God. But her husband, Keith, who's a U.S. citizen, is still being held hostage now, today. She's here with her daughter Ilan and her grandchildren, and if she's near the stage, I'd like to have her just come up and say hello for a second, just give a little wave, and then encourage us all to pray for the speedy release soon of her husband.
Okay, I've got 1 minute, so I better be quick. I'm Aviva. I was a hostage in Gaza. I felt it. I saw it. And it should not happen to anybody in the world, and no Jew. I'm standing here for my Keith that is still a hostage, and for all the hostages that are still there. We need to bring them home now. I want to say thank you to everybody that's doing everything they can. And I want the light of Hanukkah to fill all the world, extra light, to bring them all back home. So let's just light the candles, please, this year, because we need it to bring them back home. We need them to stop suffering underneath the ground in Gaza. There's at least 50 hostages that are alive, that are screaming to get out of there and to come out and to be free and to light the candles at home. So let's hope and wish that it's going to happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Aviva. I know from working with many of the hostages and their families, the freed hostages and their families, that it's not easy to share remarks, but I hope you'll all learn the lesson that I just learned. Maybe it's not in your program either, but make a minute or two or three. As Aviva said, I'm going to say a few words for Keith. We can all find a few minutes to do what we weren't planning to do and do something to help the effort to make sure that we see them all brought back very, very soon. It is insane that a year after October 7th, we still have to be praying for this. And I hope that those who are holding them will realize that the only human thing to do now is let them go. Points have been made. Darkness has to turn to light. People have to start to understand each other. And whatever your opinion is, we all know that this is not normal. And as a Jew and as a United States citizen, I beg everyone who can do whatever you can do to make sure that those who are holding our brothers and sisters who are innocent, just let them go. It's time. Moses said it to Pharaoh, and we have to say it to whoever we have to say it to until we celebrate their safe return. So you want to know where all of this effort came from. It came from an address by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, our mentor, the mentor of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, who has 6,500 emissary couples in all 50 states and in over 110 countries doing what I'm doing here. And I'd like you to pay your attention to the screens just so we can hear his words that inspired so many wonderful events of light.
Zum Mifzah Chanukah in der Nähe von Misuda, da soll rumnehmen, Kol Bote Yisrael, als in jeder jüdische Huis soll sein näher sein als besser Beisem Ibachut. Die Linie von am Mitzvah-Nelis, ner Mitzvah Terohei, und in der Nähe von Nesi Heilig mit Jem Lejem.
I hope that in these efforts that we have been somewhat organized, at least. But in making sure a menorah reaches every Jewish home, I want to encourage you, if you're watching, and for those who are here, go to nationalmenorah.org. Order a menorah kit for yourself, and we will, through the generosity of our supporters, make sure you get one during this Hanukkah so that you could bring the light and warmth into your home, and if you're already celebrating, into the home of a friend. Remember Aviva's message to us. Make a few extra moments and spread the message of light. We now have a special children's presentation. Within Chabad Lubavitch, we have something called Tzivos Hashem. Think of it as a sort of Peace Corps, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and other such institutions, all wrapped into one for mitzvot. The Rebbe said that while children are educated in their young age to do good things, they'll do good things when they're adults as well. The highest rank one child can achieve is 5 stars. A few years back, we prepared a memo for President Obama because we were they wanted children in the meeting. We didn't know which 2 to pick, so we picked the highest ranking children at the time, and we explained the ranking system, and when he walked in, he addressed the children as general. And if the commander-in-chief of the greatest army, or armed forces, I should say, in the world, addresses these children as general, then I think it's only appropriate that right here at this event, we have them reach their 5-star rank. So our first 5-star general is Mushka Lane. To get to this level, she had to complete assignments, and I think she has completed more than anyone in the history of the organization. And she will receive her 5th star right here. Mushka, you now 5 stars. Mazel tov to you. Your right hand. That's it. We won't take any points off. Thank you very much. And I'd like to call up now the highest ranking boy in Tzivos Hashem, Mendel Raskin, who will receive his 5th star as well. We're grateful for all the community service you've already done, and we all salute you on the acquisition of your 5th star. Mazel tov. We'll be lighting the menorah in just a few moments. We have to hit dusk so that we are in time for the networks who are waiting. So I'd like you to give a warm welcome to our next speaker, Mr. Igor Tolchinsky, who's the founder, chairman, and CEO at WorldQuant, and this year's honorary chair of the National Menorah Council. An immigrant to the U.S. at a very young age, he founded WorldQuant nearly 20 years ago and has more than 1,000 employees in 27 countries. He's a global investor, CEO, innovator, and philanthropist who extensively supports Jewish causes around the world, including ours. I hope you're happy with what you see tonight, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like you to give your attention to Mr. Tolchinsky as he addresses us briefly, after which we will hear from our special guest, Secretary Mayorkas, and we'll light the menorah.
Thank you. Good evening, my friends. Tonight, under the glow of the National Menorah, we celebrate Hanukkah, a festival that reminds us that even the smallest light can dispel darkness. The story of the Maccabees teaches us that faith and courage, even in the most impossible odds, can ignite a flame that burns forever. But this flame is not ours alone. It is lit by God, and we are simply channels to bring His light into this world. It is our calling to share that light and to inspire people to come together. As an immigrant and a refugee, I've seen firsthand how faith and determination can overcome challenges, and I am proud to say that I have experienced the American dream. But I did not make that journey alone. Only by working together and setting aside our differences will we achieve the future we aspire to. Together, let us build an America that delivers on that promise. Here in Washington, in front of the White House, the center of global leadership, we light tonight, we kindle tonight, the light we kindle tonight sends a powerful message. That darkness will never defeat light, and division will never triumph over unity. Let us carry this light with us beyond tonight. May it guide us toward a future of hope, unity, and peace. Thank you, and happy Hanukkah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Tolchinsky. And before, when I mentioned Rabbi Mendy Derin as part of the National Menorah Essay Contest, I neglected to mention that we have members of his family sitting right with us, so thanks for making the trip. Our next speaker is a member of the cabinet, one who has great responsibility for something very important to all of us, the security of our homeland. It's a relatively new government agency, but it is one which directly impacts our community. And I think it's a good time for me to thank him. But before I do that, I would like to welcome him to the stage. Please put it together for the Honorable Alejandro Mayorkas, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. And now I want to thank you, sir, for the efforts we in the community we know that you have exerted for the nonprofit security grants and many other efforts to make sure that we are safe and have help in literally staying alive. So please, Mr. Secretary.
Good evening. Today we begin the celebration of Hanukkah. I draw from the beautiful and profound words of Abigail Pogrebin and Dov Linzer, published just this morning. The glue of the Jewish people for 3,000 years, indeed the key to our survival, despite all those who tried to destroy us, has been the beauty, joy, and rituals of Judaism. We can all benefit from the study of Torah, the mandates to visit the sick, feed the poor, pursue justice, welcome the stranger. There is a yearning for this beauty, this rooted history. We see it in a post-October 7 surge in synagogue attendance, Jewish learning, and communal connection. We can lean into our shared tradition and values as a beacon for what we aspire to. This Hanukkah, let us rededicate ourselves to the light that defines us and the better world we seek to build. On behalf of the President, Dr. Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Second Gentleman, I wish you all a happy Hanukkah.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. We are about to light the menorah, and I don't know what is next for Secretary Mayorkas when this administration ends, but I will say one thing, that with the Jewish knowledge he just exhibited and the talent he possesses, which I unfortunately do not yet, of making very brief speeches, he has a good future as a rabbi. I know many boards who would want to hire him. And now, before we light the menorah, however, we have to remember that just as freedom is not free, nor are events like this, because though we have the rights to perform them and organize them, they are completely privately sponsored. So I'd like to say just a word and then thank our supporters who helped us do this. And first I want to tell my Jewish brothers and sisters here in Israel and around the world, they're once again spewing hate against us. They're torching our synagogues, they're threatening our security. It's no longer a topic or a theory, it's a clear and present danger. Every day. And those who do this will join those who came before them in hate with a similar fate. And we will join ours in a victory of the Spirit. So if I can say something from here in this great assemblage today, it's to be strong and of good courage. Though we are shaken, we've been here before. And one thing we have learned is that with a strong faith and unity, even if we can be hurt, and we sure have been, we are ultimately, literally, an indestructible people. And to our friends of the Jewish people in the larger world community, we are grateful for your support. We pray for you and for your well-being and hold strong hope that you will be resilient in the face of so many pernicious attempts to unsettle you in your support of us. I might add that in addition to the gratitude of the Jewish community that we expressed to the Secretary and to the Deputy Director and to the Ambassador, I think it's important to note that we've done a lot, but we have so much more that needs to still be done. And to address and combat anti-Semitism, if I might say more specifically, because it is different in some ways from other forms of hate and demands a particular focus. And as I expressed at a meeting to which we were invited a few hundred yards behind us just last year. We, the Jewish people, have to worry first about anti-Semitism so that we can be strengthened enough to help others in society who need our support. It's almost like on the airplane where they say, put your own oxygen mask on first, because though you're tempted to save everybody else, you won't be able to if you don't survive. So I am sure that we'll all agree that more needs to be done and we have to redouble our efforts. But perhaps the best antidote and most effective one to combat anti-Semitism is an informed and robust Semitism. When we become stronger in who we are better assured of our continued survival. We don't merely celebrate a military victory of the Maccabees. We celebrate the miraculous rededication of our holy temple in Jerusalem over 2,000 years ago. It's about light and purity, more than an armed victory, which was required to reclaim our ability to worship unharmed and unhindered. So try and take this Hanukkah and seek an opportunity to learn more about our rich heritage as Americans and as Jews who are fortunate to live in this great country in the brightest time in our diaspora history. Seek an opportunity to help someone, to teach someone, to share an experience and warmth in someone else's life and with kindness. We must teach the emerging new generation to illuminate, not eliminate, to light the world, not scorch the earth, usher in a time of peace, understanding, and redemption for all of us, all over the world, as the prophets have promised us. Those who helped us make this event possible have shown real dedication as the scope of this activity has really grown. I'd like to thank, and if we can show the logos of the major sponsors on the screens, please, the World Quant Foundation, whose chairman and CEO, as you know, served as the honorary chair for this year's National Menorah Council. Suffolk, which is a major supporter of our efforts here. Chevron, which makes miracles with oil, but also searches for alternative energies. And of course, the Mayberg Foundation, that have been staunch supporters of ours for decades. Let's hear a round of applause for them. I'd also like to thank the Falick Family Foundation, Mark and Nancy Penn, the Pratt Charities, and Dan and Ariane Sachs, Harry Ajmi and family, one who wished to remain anonymous and asked me not to say their name, Yitzhak Hilda Applebaum, Jonathan and Laura Barron, the Daravoff family, Zev and Esty Drizzen, the Epstein family, Choni Hertzgen family, Bill Knapp and Jeannie Milbauer, Thor Equities, Verizon's, who only asked me to say that they love it when people connect. So look at this. Seth and Rivka Weisberg, the Weisberg Family Foundation, and all of you who went to our site of nationalmenorah.org or to jewishwashington.com and contributed. And if you didn't yet, it's not too late. I'm going to say that we're about to light the menorahs. You can tell the lift is in place. We want to thank our three cantors who came to be here with us. Cantor Yitzchak Meir Helfgott of the prestigious Park East Synagogue in Manhattan, Yossi Schwartz from the Parkland Synagogue in Florida, and Yaakov Motzen, who serves as cantor in the Shul of Bal Harbor. They will lead us in the blessings, and I please ask that you rise for the blessings and stay in place afterward until the singing of Oseh Shalom and God Bless America is over. And at that time, we will conclude the program. Thank you very much. Please rise.
Baruch
Senator Butler, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Wise, you're not being honest with us, are you?
That is incorrect.
Well, we all may be poorer under President Biden, but we're not stupid. We have a long list of your articles and your opinions and your political statements. On March 8, 2017, you wrote an article for Time magazine while you were a sitting judge. It's entitled Judge, Gender Laws Are at Odds with Science. I'm going to quote your words. When legislators blur the lines of church and state and enact laws that permit or prohibit conduct based on biological gender as only male or female, they place an impossible burden on the judiciary. End quote. Did I read that accurately?
I do not know because I don't have the article in front of me.
Well, I do. You also said in that article, quote, your words, not mine, sex has countless natural permutations, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
I believe that is consistent with medical science and under the Daubert standard, the science that comes in as expert testimony in trials.
On October 13, 2020, while you were serving as a state judge, you wrote an article for The Atlantic entitled, quote, your words, not mine, America's judiciary doesn't look like America. And you criticized this committee and President Trump for his judicial nominees. You said, quote, these are your words, not mine. The judiciary crafted over the past 4 years does not look like America. Not one of these judges is black, and more than 90% were raised or currently identify as Christians. I don't know how you knew that. And then you say, quote, your words, not mine. Identity is the lens that filters everything and everyone we encounter. End quote. Did I read that correctly?
Again, I don't know because I don't have the article in front of me.
I got it right here. You wrote another article on July 31, 2020 for the San Francisco Daily Journal, in which you advocate for the right of sitting judges to be able to go to protests, didn't you?
That is incorrect.
No, it's not. I'm looking at it right here. This is what you say. No judge should be ethical. Your words, not mine. You just said you didn't say them. You turned these articles over. No judge should be ethically constrained from speaking or taking action that reinforces that constitutional and moral imperative. May judges participate in demonstrations that denounce racism, support equal justice, and reinforce our constitutional rights to free speech and peaceable assembly? Yes. End quote. Did I read that correctly?
I don't know because I don't have the article in front of me.
If you're a federal judge, are you going to go to protests?
I would like to answer the substance of the underlying question that was asked.
I'd like you to answer my question. I've only got another minute or so. If you're a federal, let me put it another way. Have you ever gone to a protest, a public protest, while you're a sitting judge?
Senator Kennedy, the article that you are referring to
Have you ever gone
written...
to a protest while you're a sitting judge?
I do not believe that I have ever attended a protest as a sitting judge, or perhaps ever in my life.
And you talk about Girls Inc. You say you've never heard of them. You were on the, or you don't know that much about them. You were on the board from 2014 to 2024. You're still on their board, aren't you?
I'm not. My term expired this last month.
And you've given them over $50,000, haven't you?
I do not believe that is correct.
That's what your report says. And this is the same Girls Inc. that says, quote, on its website, here's how they define girls. Quote, girls refers to gender-expansive youth, cis girls, trans girls, non-binary youth, gender and non-conforming youth, genderqueer youth, and any girl-identified youth. Did I read that correctly?
I don't know. I've never heard of that policy or that definition
Right.
from Girls Inc.
Listen, in spite of your, can I just have 30 more seconds? In spite of your strongly held political beliefs, and we've got all of them, all your articles, they're as long as King Kong's are. Are you telling us today, do you believe that you will not allow your strongly held political beliefs to influence your judicial opinions? Do you believe that?
The best evidence of the type of federal judge I will be,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
type of
Do you
judge.
believe that? Do you believe that?
It's the type of judge I have been for 10 years, who is one who always puts the law above my personal
Do you
views.
also believe in Bigfoot? Do you believe in the Tooth Fairy?
Your time has expired, Senator.
Do you believe Jimmy Hoffa died of natural causes?
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Perk, I'd like to just continue Senator Ossoff's line of questioning. He was just asking about the First Amendment. You said that you had a number of cases on the speech side of the First Amendment as Solicitor General. Is that right?
That's correct.
You also had some religion clause cases too, though, didn't you?
I believe I've had one.
So let's talk about when you were Solicitor General defending the governor's executive order that closed churches in the state. Do you remember that executive order?
Yes, Senator.
So the executive order said that all indoor gatherings of 10 or more people were banned, with some exceptions. Do you recall?
I believe it said that there was no limits on outdoor gatherings, and if it was not possible to have an outdoor gathering, then you could have it inside with 10 people.
Okay, so if it's 10 or more people, you can't have it indoors unless it is impossible. Here's what you told the court. Here's who you told the court would absolutely have to be able to meet indoors and function indoors, regardless of the governor's executive order. Airports, buses, train terminals, medical facilities, shopping mall, shopping centers, Walmart, Lowe's, and other retail businesses of all kinds. At the same time, you told the court churches should be closed. Churches should have to meet outside or just not meet at all. Why is that? Why is it that Lowe's and Walmart, they absolutely have to be open? They're essential. Churches, good luck to you.
Well, Senator, of course, I didn't design that policy. I was a lawyer defending a client.
But didn't you? I thought that you were the Solicitor General making these arguments.
Senator, I had a brief involvement in that case, and I actually think my involvement.
Wait. So you didn't? You weren't? These aren't your arguments? You didn't say this to the court?
Senator, I never filed a brief. So what happened is the complaint was filed, and before
you weren't Solicitor General defending the executive order at the time.
Oh, yes, Senator.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's just skip all that and let's just get to the substance here. You were the Solicitor General. You defended it. You made the arguments. So why is it that Walmart and Lowe's can be open, but churches had to be closed?
Senator, I think that if you study that case,
I've read the case. I have it right here.
The procedural history, you'll see that it actually reflects my respect for religious liberty. So at that time, in May of 2020, the prevailing law was Chief Justice
Why is it respectful to close churches but not to close Walmart and Lowe's? Listen, I got nothing against Walmart and Lowe's. I like those stores fine. I was at both of them last weekend. But I was also in church last weekend. And what the procedural history shows is in jurisdiction after jurisdiction during COVID, governments discriminated, and I use that word advisedly, discriminated against people of faith, particularly Christian churches, Catholic churches, Orthodox Jewish synagogues, including your state, including this executive order. I want to know why. Why was it that you argued that churches ought to be closed, but Lowe's could be open? Explain that to me.
Senator, so what Chief Justice Roberts said in the South Bay decision was that those kind of retail establishments have short-lived durations, and for the relevantly similar activity was
short-lived duration. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Senator, if I could,
was it a mistake to close churches while you allowed Lowe's and Walmart to be open?
So that is what the Supreme Court held about a year later, and the point I'm trying to make.
I'm asking you,
yes.
Was it a mistake for you to argue to this court that it was fine to close these churches, but Lowe's and Walmart could be open? Do you regret it?
Senator, I had a duty to represent my
client.
So
you don't regret it? You have the benefit of retrospect now. Do you regret it?
Senator, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to criticize the policy decisions that I was asked to
defend. You have no problem with it. Here's what else you told the court. You also told the court that if a church raised an objection to this, if the church said, no, we think we need to meet indoors, who did they have to answer to? They had to explain themselves to the sheriff or local law enforcement, the cops. And the cops would then make a determination about the church's theology. Do you remember that? Do you remember that?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. And so, do you remember what the court said about that?
So the court enjoined the governor's order in that respect.
The court says this court has grave concerns about how that answer, your answer, comports with the free exercise clause. Then the court went on to say that, you couldn't enforce the law. Why not? The government cannot treat, I'm quoting, cannot treat religious worship as a world apart from non-religious activities with no good, or more importantly, no constitutional explanation. What do you have to say about that?
Senator, after that TRO order was entered, in consultation with my client, we chose not to appeal at a time when it was abundantly clear that we would have prevailed on appeal, because the prevailing law at the time was Chief Justice Roberts' concurrence in South Bay. And so I actually think that reflects...
Well, so you were doing, you're saying that you really were doing churches a favor by making these arguments for them, by shutting them down, while Lowe's and Walmart and bars and who knows what else were all open?
Well, Senator, I didn't design that policy.
You defended it, and you just sat here and told me you don't have any regrets about it. Here's the deal. I've seen a parade of people sit in your seat who did the same thing, the same exact thing. Our respect for our rights, our constitutional rights, our civil liberties, they're not tested when it's easy. They're tested when it's hard. After 9/11, we found out who really believed in civil liberties and who didn't. In the COVID year, we found out who believed in the right to free exercise and who didn't. And it looks like you didn't. And now you were in good company. There were a lot of people just like you who did what you did, who discriminated against churches, who defended it and said, well, it's a necessity. It's a necessity. But what that tells me is when push comes to shove, you think the First Amendment is optional. It's not optional. And I haven't voted for a single person who shut down churches. And I'm sure as heck not going to vote for you. And I'll just say to what remains of this administration, if you keep sending people up here who voted to shut down churches and openly discriminated against people of faith, you're going to get this reaction every darn time. You should be telling me you regret this. It was an error. It was unconstitutional. You shouldn't have made those arguments. In retrospect, you regret it. That would be the answer you should have given. You didn't, and you will not have my vote.
Mr. Park, would you like to complete an answer to any of those questions?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. So what I was trying to explain is that I was invited by the court to defend the governor's order less than 24 hours after the complaint was filed at a TRO hearing. I never filed a brief. We filed a declaration from the chief medical officer for the state. I did my duty to appear at the TRO hearing and advocate for my client's interests. But after the adverse decision the following day, in consultation with my client, we chose not to appeal when the controlling law at the time was pretty clear that we would have prevailed, because Chief Justice Roberts, a couple days later, issued his concurring opinion in South Bay. It wasn't until almost a year later, with Chief Justice Roberts in dissent, that the free exercise analysis in Tandon and Brooklyn Diocese was different. And that's why, at that time, there were about 35 states, including, by my understanding, about 15 states with Republican governors, that had similar or more restrictive limitations on group congregate worship. But we chose, and the governor chose, to issue a new executive order, to not appeal, and to exempt all religious activity from the limitations.
Thank you, Mr. Park. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Mr. Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Woodhouse. Position of sanctions coordinator is supposed to oversee and implement sanctions in an objective and nonpartisan way. In examining your record during the Biden administration, I've become concerned that you are singularly unqualified for this position. Far too often, the Biden administration has politicized sanctions. This administration has used sanctions as a bludgeon against countries and international figures whom Democrats don't like, while ignoring much more significant violations by those embraced by the global populist left. You have sanctioned our friends and ignored our enemies. And the mess on the global stage is a direct result of that. Let's start by talking about Israel and Hamas. Hamas has launched repeated wars against Israel during the Biden administration, injuring, kidnapping, murdering thousands of people, including dozens of Americans. They know they cannot defeat Israel militarily, so their fundamental strategy is to use Palestinian human shields to generate Palestinian civilian casualties, and therefore international outrage to damage Israel. To counter that strategy, in 2018, I authored and secured into law mandatory sanctions against Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists for using human shields. In May of 2021, Hamas launched yet another war against Israel, once again using human shields. Mr. Woodhouse, how many Hamas terrorists did you sanction for using human shields during this conflict?
Thank you for that question, Senator. During the Biden administration, we have released multiple rounds of sanctions targeting both Hamas and its financial networks in the region and globally, seeking to continue to degrade its ability to operate and perpetrate these awful crimes against Israel.
So I understand you want to make a generic statement. I want to ask the question again because it's precise. How many Hamas terrorists did you sanction for using human shields during the 2021 conflict?
With respect to Shield Act sanctions, I'll have to get back to you. I don't have that number currently.
Well, I can help you on it. That number was 0. You did not sanction anybody, and that's why you don't have the number, because there's not an answer to give. All right, let's move forward. Hamas sanctions, they use human shields. You've got a mandatory obligation to sanction them, but this administration doesn't want to, because in a conflict between the Palestinians and Israel, this administration has decided that you're for the Palestinians and against Israel. Recently, you exercised the other half of that. This administration sanctioned Israelis. Those sanctions were imposed pursuant to a new executive order that imposes crippling sanctions on, quote, persons undermining peace, security, and stability in the West Bank. Critics have rightly said that this executive order and your imposition of sanctions is meant to target only Israeli Jews living in Judea and Samaria. The administration has claimed in your talking points that the sanctions are neutral. So if it's neutral, it ought to be pretty simple to answer this question. The Palestinian Authority gives hundreds of millions of dollars to terrorists who murder Jews. These are pay-to-slay payments, which they call martyrs' funds. How many sanctions have you imposed on the Palestinian Authority or Palestinian officials for paying for the murder of Jews?
Thank you for that question, Senator. The program that you just referenced has been very recently established. There's been one round of sanctions imposed under that program. I can't preview future action.
All on Jews?
Expect the first round did, the targets were all Israeli. Yes.
Well, and clearly in the wake of October 7th, you're looking at Hamas terrorists who murder 1,200 people, who rape women, who murder children. And I'll tell you, it was sickening. A number of us sat here. The chairman of this committee arranged for us to listen to stories of the horrors that came on. Why does the Biden administration look at that and say, clearly what we need to do is sanction Israeli Jews, but we don't sanction Hamas. We don't sanction Hamas terrorists for using human shields, and you don't sanction the Palestinian Authority for essentially offering rewards for the murder of civilians. Why not?
Senator, President Biden and the administration have been very clear that the United States stands behind Israel's right to defend itself against these attacks.
Okay.
We also have imposed...
Except for the fact that you are only sanctioning our friends and you're not sanctioning our enemies. All right, my time has expired, but I want to ask one last thing. You've screwed up sanctions in the Middle East. You've screwed up sanctions in Latin America, which could be an entire other round of questioning. But let me end with this. Screwing up sanctions also caused the war in Ukraine. If you knew in 2021 that allowing Nord Stream 2 to be physically completed would convince Vladimir Putin that he was able to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure and then invade Ukraine, would you still have made the same decisions you made then about Nord Stream 2 to give Putin a multi-billion-dollar gift and an invitation to invade Ukraine?
Thank you, Senator. When Russia began that invasion, they had already heard from the president, standing next to German Chancellor Scholz, that if Russia invaded, Nord Stream 2 would be no more. And Chancellor Scholz said that there was no disagreement.
If Russia so did that work? I find your answer astonishing.
Well, Nord Stream 2 is no more.
Are you claiming responsibility for that?
No.
You'll make news if you're saying that.
No.
I'm not aware of that. Well, then that can't be your answer. If that's not what you're saying, you smirk and say Nord Stream 2 is no more, but your gift, refusing to enforce the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, caused the invasion. My question, which you didn't answer, if you knew then what you know now, would you still have given that gift to Putin and started the war?
Senator, the decision that we had to make in 2021 was a pipeline that was almost complete. The Secretary has been clear.
Are you going to answer the question? Would you have made the same decision knowing what you know now? Yes or no?
The decision that we had to make at that time was based on the facts and realities available at that time.
It was staggeringly wrong. All of us told you it was staggeringly wrong. You didn't listen to us, and it caused the war because you put ideology above the interest of America and above the interest of our allies.
Thanks, Senator Butler. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Congratulations to your families. Ms. Suknanan, if I could start with you. I think we've established from the recent lines of questioning that you worked at Jones Day. You were a partner at Jones Day, is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
And you had, how long were you at Jones Day, out of curiosity?
I was at the firm for 6 years, Senator.
Okay. You had a series of clients in that time, I imagine. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
That included a series of hedge funds, global hedge funds. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Funds like Altair Global, Claren Road Asset Management, Glendon Capital Management, Nakota Capital, Oak Tree Capital Management, Oker Rose, and Centerbridge Partners. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
And you represented these hedge funds in particular during a debt crisis that Puerto Rico had in 2017. Do you remember that?
Yes, Senator.
So Puerto Rico had a debt crisis in 2017. Your clients had bought a series of bonds and held quite a lot of money in bonds, if I'm correct. And it's $1.4 billion. Does that sound right?
Yes, Senator.
Of course, other people had bought bonds too. Normal people, everyday people had bought bonds. And when the debt crisis kicked off, the courts froze all of the assets, all of Puerto Rico's assets, to make sure that everybody got their fair share and was paid out in accordance with the law, and that normal people who bought bonds would get their fair share, right? I mean, I've got it right so far?
Yes, Senator.
So you, however, you, on behalf of your clients, you invented a novel claim. You filed a lawsuit under the takings clause. Is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
So you argued that the government was stealing from the hedge funds by freezing all of the funds, and if they pursued that course of action and didn't give your clients all of their money first, then they would have violated the U.S. Constitution. Is that right?
That's not quite correct, Senator.
Why was it a good idea? Why represent all of these hedge funds trying to get billions of dollars out of Puerto Rico? whenever other everyday bondholders are left to pick up the slack. You dragged this thing out for years. I mean, you went back and forth to the circuit court. Other hedge funds then followed your lead. They thought that that was terrific argument, super inventive. So then they did the same thing. So then other hedge funds piled in. The bankruptcy went on and on. Puerto Rico was forced to institute serious austerity measures, much to the detriment of their citizens, average people who don't have money for hedge funds. Why is it a good idea to go to Puerto Rico and to try to get your rich clients prioritized over normal people in a way that seriously impoverished, if I might say, the citizens of the island?
Senator, the legal profession is bound by a code of ethics that I think is incredibly important and that I am proud to adhere to in every case. My clients in that case...
Take from the rich or take from the poor to give to the rich? Is that the code of ethics?
Senator, Jones Day was retained in that case to represent a group of clients. Along with my colleagues, I made the best possible arguments.
Well, wait. Are you saying it wasn't voluntary? You represented them, right? You were lead counsel, I thought. Were you lead counsel?
Senator, I was not lead counsel. I was one of many lawyers who handled that litigation.
And it was involuntary? You were assigned, or you chose to do it? You did it voluntarily, didn't you?
Senator, those hedge funds were a client of the firm. I was asked to join the team and work on that matter.
But you did. Okay. My question is why? Why is that? Why is it a good idea? I mean, you can say no.
Senator, my colleagues and I at Jones Day in that case made the best possible argument.
Well, I know, and I listen. I don't doubt I'm not questioning your talent. I understand why they wanted to hire you. Your talent's considerable. I'm just wondering why you thought it was important to deploy it on behalf of these hedge funds to the detriment of everyday citizens who were bearing the cost. And you invented it was very novel. Listen, I give you credit. And everybody else thought so too. That's why all the other rich players got in and said, we want to do that, and drug it out for years. I'm just wondering why you thought that was a good idea.
Senator, Jones Day was retained to represent
I heard that the
those
first
clients.
time. I'm just wondering why you thought it was a good idea. You could use your considerable talents in any number of cases, ways, means, and methods. You could have said no to representing these clients. You didn't, obviously. In fact, you vigorously defended them to the point of inventing this novel theory, which was quite successful for your very lucrative clients. I'm just wondering why.
Senator, I have represented a number of clients over the course of my career. I have represented the government. I have represented clients.
You don't have any problem with this? You think this is a good idea? You stand by it?
Senator,
No
my
regrets?
job in that representation was to vigorously represent my clients, which I did.
Sure, but we'd established, I think, a second ago, I thought you told Senator Kennedy that you resigned from Jones Day over a client that the firm was representing who you didn't like.
Senator, that is not at all what I said.
You didn't resign from Jones Day?
Senator, I did not resign from Jones Day because of any particular representation.
Oh, so it wasn't a moral, you had no moral quandaries?
Absolutely not, Senator.
You had no moral quandaries with any of the cases at Jones Day? That's your testimony?
Senator, I left the firm in January of 2021 because I was offered an opportunity to return to public service. It's an opportunity the firm supported and that I took.
You had no quandaries with them representing in the Trump litigation? You had
Senator,
no problem with that? That's your testimony?
Senator, I did not leave my firm because of that representation.
You had
I
no
left
moral
my
problem with
firm, Senator, I left the firm months later because I received an opportunity to return
You had no problem
to
with
public
that, and you
service.
had no problem representing the bondholders. So your testimony is you're happy to represent anybody who comes your way. Donald Trump, you bet. The bondholders, you bet. Hedge funds, you bet. Whoever. That's your testimony? I just want to make sure I got it right.
Senator, throughout my career, I have adhered to the code of ethics that all lawyers are bound by.
Well, sure, but the code of ethics allow you to make money from anybody. Listen, you can choose your clients. I'm not accusing you of any ethical violations at all. I'm not. I'm just trying to figure out why you thought it was important to have these hedge funds as your clients, and if you had any moral quandaries. And your testimony is you didn't have any moral quandaries, which is fine, but I just wonder if that's the best judgment.
Senator, throughout my career, I have represented corporate clients. I have represented criminal defendants. I have represented the government. Throughout my career, I am proud that I have fulfilled...
Want to say anything to the people of Puerto Rico while we're here?
Please let her finish the answer. Your time has expired. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Throughout my career, I have represented many different clients. I am proud that in every representation, I have made the best possible arguments for all of my clients.
Do you want to say anything to the people of Puerto Rico?
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much.
Alice of North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations to all of you for your nominations. Commissioner Crenshaw, I want to start with you. You made a statement after the SEC's recent climate rule, and I think, to use your words, you said you considered the rule to be the bare minimum and not the rule I would have written. So I'm curious, with respect to Scope 3 reporting requirements, is that one of the root causes of your disappointment? If you can keep your comments brief, I would appreciate it.
Sure, Senator. Thank you. With respect to bare minimum, my intent there was
where did it fall short?
It fell short. Well, investors. I talked about two places where investors. What I was really thinking about when I said not the rule I would have written was I would have thought about using models, assumptions, and estimates much more completely than we did. And that way we could have gotten more information to investors in a way that was less expensive. And I would also considered robust safe harbors from liability.
If confirmed, would you consider reopening the rule? And if you did, would Scope 3 reporting requirements be a part of the revised rule?
I don't know, Senator. As you know, it's in litigation right now, so a lot is going to depend on the outcome of the litigation. And
do you generally support the notion of Scope 3 reporting requirements?
I think investors had put comments in the comment file, and I think we need to balance the interests. But I think there's a way that you can look at assumptions and estimates and a safe harbor from liability to ensure that the costs are not prohibitive and to ensure that you're not asking farmers and unregistered entities to provide information.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Goldsmith-Romero, I want to go back to Silicon Valley Bank. What, in your opinion, if you could only, the major root cause of SVB's failure, what caused of SVB's failure, what was it? Was it, well, actually, let me not give you choices. What do you think the root cause of SVB Bank was?
Thank you, Senator, for that failure of risk management at the bank and then failures on the regulatory supervision.
Yeah, so you didn't see capitalization as an issue?
I was not, a bank regular at that time, but it seemed like the root causes, what you were just asking, were
poorly managed and poorly supervised?
Correct.
I think as a result, because at the time of it seems like it was ages ago. It's hard to believe it hasn't been that long. But at the time of the failure, everybody was saying, and because they felt so many other banks were failing, was it your opinion that what we saw there was going to ripple through? I know we had the one other failure, First Republic, but do you view those as some of us do as kind of outliers in the banking industry based on their models?
So this is
activities?
This is a really interesting question. So let me take it back even a little bit farther, which is the crisis. And this really comes down to consumer confidence, right? If consumers don't have confidence that their money is safe, businesses and individuals, then you're going to see bank runs and you're going to see contagion. You may have bank runs not even related to the banks who are in trouble. And what we don't want to have that. We don't want to have people pulling their money out of the bank and putting it in just one of the hugest banks thinking that it's safe. And so, I think there was a situation where there was Silicon Valley Bank and Signature, and they tried to, the regulators tried to contain that. But I do think we need to really be looking deeply at this issue of bank runs and consumer confidence, particularly in modernized banking.
I just feel like there was some thinking. A lot of people were attributing the Senate Bill 2155. I was one of four on my side that worked with Senator Warner and others on that bill. They were trying to blame it on just a lack of regulation, but it doesn't really. It seemed like a lack of supervision and a lack of risk management. So I'll move on from there. Kind of curious about your view of the 2024 stress test. I read the results of those stress tests to say that our banks are pretty well capitalized. How do you read the results of those stress tests?
Yeah, so again, I'm on the outside looking at it just like you are. And so it does seem like some capital is strong. I think there are some areas that need to be looked at, but that's how I read the stress.
But is a stress test by definition really subjecting the banks to some of those areas? Do you think that the stress tests themselves are insufficient, or you just need to look at the details within the stress test scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with stress tests. I mean, it's designed for capital adequacy, and so...
And it's literally stressing, so it's coming up with extraordinary circumstances, so...
Absolutely, sir, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, congratulations. Judge Cheeks, I see you're quite a prolific writer, and you say I heard you answer Senator Durbin's question. You said you don't take a position in these articles?
I said I tried not to take a position in most of my articles.
Well, you didn't succeed. In October 2020, you published an article entitled, "I Can't Breathe." You remember that article?
I do remember that article.
Okay. You were talking about Mr. George Floyd's tragic death. Here's what you said, quote, your words, not mine, quote, "What happened next after Mr. Floyd's death is nothing short of amazing. Mostly peaceful protest broke out almost immediately in Minneapolis, and the use of excessive force by police officers became the villain in a sea of protesters," end quote. Did I read that accurately?
That sounds correct, yes, Senator.
All right, and then in October of 2019, you wrote an article entitled "Raising Responsibility: A Concerned Parent's Perspective." You remember that?
I do remember that, yes.
Did you take a position in that article?
I recall my position being talking about how am I going to address issues with my
So
children.
you did take positions, unlike what you told Senator Durbin.
What I told Senator Durbin that I try not to take positions.
Okay. Well, I want to read you from your article. Quote, your words, not mine. "Needless to say, I have a guarded opinion about the police. How do I teach my sons to respect them and fear them at the same time? There can be no question that police officers have some of these same internal or external biases." Let me repeat that. There can be no question that police officers, not some, all police officers have some of these same internal or external biases described above. Do some of them view black males differently than others? I think so. Sounds like a position to me. Do some think black males are more dangerous than others? I think so. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you read that correctly.
All right, now, and then in May of 2019, you remember writing an article for a publication, the title of the article, the title of your article in which you say you didn't take a position was called "The Federal Dungeon Part 2, Court Proceedings." You remember that?
I do.
Okay. And you were talking about, it was then under President Trump, not President Biden. The Department of Justice then had a zero tolerance for illegal entry into the United States, because that, of course, is the law. And this is what you said about that. Quote, "Technically, the law was broken, but these particular defendants, poor, hungry, hardworking, and not dangerous, deserve a pass from prosecution." End quote. Saying that illegal immigration should not be criminalized is a position, is it not?
It is. What I'd like to add is that everything that I wrote while I was an advocate, not a sitting judge.
Oh, I see. That makes a difference. Did you mean it when you wrote it?
When I wrote it?
Did you mean it?
I meant it when I wrote it because...
Okay, but you don't mean it now?
I do not mean it now.
So if you take off your advocate hat today, do you have your advocate hat on today?
I am no longer an advocate. I'm a sitting magistrate judge.
Okay, so you don't tell the truth when you're an advocate, but you do when you're not? Is it okay to lie if you're an advocate?
I don't follow the question.
I think it's pretty clear, and I think you follow it. You've taken a lot of radical positions, Judge, and you can't make this catwalk backwards. Now, you can't make this catwalk backwards. I have one question for our second judge here. Judge, you remember a couple years ago going on a broadcast called Visible Voices Podcast? I do, sir. All right. Here's what you said. It was just a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking way back in law school or anything. We're talking about a couple years. You'd been on the bench how long? 8 years then?
I've been on the bench almost 10.
Yeah, well, but when you said this in front of God and country, you'd been on the bench 8. You said it in January 31, 2022. Here's what you said, quote, I think that COVID has brought a lot of these issues to bear, especially in the legal profession, where I tell a lot of people all the time, we, the people, never included people of color or women. When you have an institution that is set up by property-owning white men for 200 years or so, it wasn't geared toward thinking about what would be the best work schedule or how we could really incorporate women with children in this field. So it's been a challenge that COVID was exacerbated, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, Senator, you did.
And then you go on later in the podcast to call for quotas based on gender, don't you?
No, sir, I never,
Yes, you
ever
do.
claimed
If the
anything
senator
about
will
quotas.
give me time, I'll read what you said. May I finish reading what you said? The witnesses denied believing in quotas based on gender, and I have the quote.
Senator, you may read the quote, and then she will give an opportunity to respond.
Okay, here's your quote, Judge. Your words, not mine. Quote, I think recognizing implicit bias is really important. Me too. But I'll be honest, I don't think that's enough. Because the truth of the matter is nobody is going to voluntarily give up their position in favor of women. Women have to demand it. Women have to be willing to require and hold people accountable, hold men who are in those positions accountable, and say, quote, why don't we have an equal number of supervising judges, close quote. You didn't tell me the truth, did you? You believe in quotas based on gender, don't you?
Senator, your time's expired. I'd let the witness respond.
Thank you. No, I have never advocated on behalf of quotas. I think it's undisputed that at the time.
This?
Please.
I just read it.
I think at the time that the Constitution was written, there is no question that it did not include women, and it did not include people of color in the definition of we the people. We, as women and people of color, have only recently been able to be judges or jurors or politicians. But the systems that were created when I was excluded and when people of color were excluded continue. All I was commenting upon is that the diversity in the judiciary builds integrity in the system and public confidence in those institutions. I never mentioned anything about quota. Thank you.
Good try, Judge.
Senator Butler?
Good try. Good try.
Judge Lopez, I'm going to quickly note there's a reason the Democrats have scheduled you on this panel, because you have a long pattern of sentencing criminal defendants to egregiously light sentences, including one child molester who molested a 4-year-old and 9-year-old, and you sentenced him to only 6 years in prison, including, as we heard before, one woman who was responsible for killing her 1-year-old son, who was coated in fentanyl. His pajamas were coated in fentanyl. His sheets were coated in fentanyl. You could have sentenced her to 30 years. You sentenced her to only 4 years. It's an egregious pattern, but the reason you're put on this panel is the Democrats know that most Republicans will not have time to question you about that terrible record, because your colleague on this panel, her record is even worse. Ms. Campbell, I will say I have seen some astonishing nominees from this administration, but I have to admit your record takes the cake. A judge should not be a political activist. Your record demonstrates to me a long history of being a political activist, but not just an activist who affiliates with extreme and radical organizations. Now, when Senator Grassley asked you about the Workers' Dignity Organization, you gave, I think, deliberately misleading answer. You said you did not represent them, and that convinced Senator Grassley not to continue on that line of questioning. You have been a legal advisor to that organization since 2013. That is what you have publicly printed on your AVO biography. It is what has been described in the Tennessee Bar Association when you were nominated. It explicitly says she served as a legal advisor for local workers' rights nonprofit Workers' Dignity. Now, why is it you're distancing yourself from them? The reason is because they are utterly radical. If you look at this group that you've served as the legal advisor for over a decade, this is an openly Marxist organization. This is a communist organization. Now, those words are not said lightly. According to their own characterization of their views, this group says there's no election outcome that improves conditions for workers. The laws of this country have never worked for our people, and now that the system is crumbling, we will continue to stand in community and solidarity with each other. The only way we win in a world we deserve is by building a multiracial working class revolution that can push out white nationalism, violent state racism, and the capitalist class that is desperately clutching to hold control and profits as the people rise up. Why have you spent a decade as a legal advisor to an openly communist and Marxist organization? I don't think your microphone's on.
I apologize, Senator. If I could briefly clarify, more than a decade ago, probably for the course of 2 or 3 years, I served on an advisory board that helped this, at the time, was supposed to be a nonprofit workers' rights organization get set up and get started.
Did you know they were a communist organization?
Senator, at that time, they did not express these kinds of views. It was an organization.
So this is new. This wasn't the case then.
Yes, and I have not been affiliated with them in more than a decade.
You're aware that your current profile that you have up, your legal bio, says you are right now an advisor to them.
I apologize for any confusion about that.
So your testimony under oath, and that's all right, the facts will come out, but your testimony, I want to make it explicit. Your testimony under oath is that you have done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long?
I have not served on their advisory board for...
You've done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long? Please answer the question.
Many, many years.
How many?
I don't know, sitting here today. It's been many years.
Okay, if you look at other statements from this organization, because they are radicals. They are radicals. If you look also, this is the same group in 2020. They called for abolishing ICE, abolishing prisons and detention centers, and abolishing the police. Why did you volunteer for a communist organization that calls for abolishing ICE and abolishing the police?
Senator, I have never seen these comments before.
You didn't know who you were volunteering for?
I was not a volunteer for them at that time.
You were a legal advisor. Were you paid?
No, I was
Then
not.
you were a volunteer. If you volunteered to be a legal advisor, you were a volunteer. Why did you volunteer? Do you support abolishing ICE?
Senator, at this time, I had...
Do you support abolishing ICE?
I do not, Senator.
Well, it's amazing because a minute ago you also told Senator Graham that the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition that has a manifesto calling for abolishing ICE, you said you had nothing to do with it, which is fairly astonishing because on page 3 of their manifesto, they thank you by name for what they say. We would like to thank the following individuals and organizations for their thoughtful feedback and input. This platform would not have been possible without their expertise. Are they lying?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that manifesto.
Are they lying? Did you provide any assistance? Did you give feedback and input, which is what they say on the cover page?
Senator, I didn't even know that existed, and so no, I did not provide input on it.
Judge, welcome.
Thank you.
You are probably the least productive member of your district court, isn't that right?
Well, I have not considered myself in those terms, Senator.
Well, let me explain what I mean. You have 125 motions pending that you've declined to decide. Let me finish. That's more than any other district judge in the entire Seventh Circuit. In fact, you rank 7th highest nationally, do you not?
I am not familiar with those statistics, Senator Kennedy.
You haven't looked?
I did look in preparation for this hearing, but I didn't compare myself to others.
You haven't seen that you ranked the 7th, the worst in the country in terms of making decisions?
You are the first to tell me this. And I think for me, I stress the quality of my decision making. And as I explained, I came on, I was the first district judge to come on during this administration.
Yeah, but so were all the others. I mean, there have been 68 district judges confirmed in the 117th Congress. In terms of motions pending for more than 6 months, you rank number 3. You all came on at the same time. You all had the same problems with COVID. You're the 3rd worst. You really think of all the other district judges in the 7th Circuit, you're the one that ought to be promoted based on this record?
Senator, this is something that I've discussed with my fellow judges. Many of us new judges from...
Not you said you'd never looked at these statistics.
I haven't, these particular statistics I am not familiar with. But in terms of new judges, both from the current administration and the former administration, we are quite a collegial bunch. And oftentimes talk about the pressures of a new judge and the way reassignments work in our district, which is that you get, for example, 300 cases.
Yes, ma'am, I understand. I'm familiar with the procedure in federal court. Here's what I'm trying to understand. Why is your record so bad?
Well, I don't view it that way, Senator. When I look at the quality of my decision-making, the feedback that I get from parties,
Of course parties are not going to criticize you. They want you to rule in their favor.
I understand, Senator Kennedy.
I mean, that's just the way it works. Help me understand why you have such an abysmal record in moving cases. I mean, it costs a lot of money to litigate, and people are paying lawyers, and time is money. And of all the district court judges in the 7th Circuit, you're the worst in terms of moving cases. Why do you think you deserve to be promoted over all of those others?
So, Senator, again, I'm not familiar with the statistics, but I stand by my record and that I give parties what they need. I think, I am regularly in my courtroom. I am regularly issuing decisions. I just came on at a very difficult time where there was a backlog in the courts.
So did everybody else. Let me ask you, when you were a partner in your law firm, you volunteered to write a brief on behalf of the Brady Center. You wrote the brief, and this is what you said. You volunteered for this. You weren't being paid. Is that right?
This was a pro bono case that one of my partners brought in, yes.
You said, quote, assault weapons may be banned because they're extraordinarily dangerous and are not appropriate for legitimate self-defense purposes, close quote. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Just to clarify there, I was local counsel. Our Supreme...
but you wrote the brief. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Senator Kennedy, actually, I did not write the brief. The brief was written by...
You signed the brief, though, didn't you?
Correct. I signed the brief.
When you sign a brief, you're testifying to the court that everything in it is true, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
they're your words in terms of the court, right?
Well, you're correct, Senator Kennedy. Okay. I would never sign...
Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
So I am not a gun expert, and at the time, that brief I think was about 10 years.
Giving the court advice about, say, ban assault weapons. What is? You told the court you were an expert. Just tell me what you wanted to ban.
Senator, sitting here today, as I said, I did not write that brief. I was local counsel.
Sign the brief.
I understand. At the time,
Tell me what you wanted to ban. That's all I want to know, Judge.
I don't remember the exact definition of assault weapons in the ordinance that was at issue.
So you submitted a brief to an appellate brief. You signed it, and you don't know what. And you said abolish assault weapons, and you don't know what you wanted them to abolish?
Senator, at the time that I signed the brief, I read the brief because our Supreme Court required an Illinois bar member to sign the brief. I was not responsible for researching the content.
You were responsible for the brief.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sitting here today, I do not remember the characteristics of that were cited in the ordinance for the assault weapons ban. It's not an area of practice that I have specialized in. I'm sure 10 years ago I could have answered your question.
And
but
Judge,
sitting here today,
you think you deserve to be promoted with this record?
Senator, I stand by my record. I stand by my record.
Senator Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to you and your
threatened and
Thank
to.
you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Senator Grassley.
You're welcome. I'll send you a bill.
Ms. Campbell, according to the AVVO, I don't know whether that's pronounced, I have a profile. It appears that you served as legal counsel to a group named Workers' Dignity. This group has taken a number of radical leftist positions. For example, Workers' Dignity has advocated for abolition of what they call oppressive systems like police and the military. Do you agree with this position? Do you support the abolition of police and military?
Senator, respectfully, I have never represented that organization, and I do not agree with that position.
Well, then I'm sorry that our research wasn't as accurate as it ought to be. I'll yield.
All right. Now, according to your AVO profile, you've been legal advisor to an organization called Workers' Dignity from 2013 to the present. Is that correct?
Senator, I have never represented Workers' Dignity. A long time ago, I was on a legal advisory board to help them.
So you have been a legal
started.
advisor. You have been a legal advisor to the.
How come you didn't tell me that?
I apologize, Senator. I have never represented Workers' Dignity. I was on an advisory board about 15 years ago when they were starting.
Okay, and when did your work for Workers' Dignity end?
I'm sorry, can you
You talked about that it was a long time ago. When did it end? When did your work for them as a legal advisor end?
Senator, I would guess in about 2012 or 13.
All right. Now, according to your AVO profile, on June 12th, according to that profile, you authored an endorsement for an attorney, an attorney named Raquel Lee Bellamy on June 12th. So, at the least, you should have been aware that your AVO profile listed that you were currently a legal advisor to Workers' Dignity. Were you aware of this?
I was not, Senator.
You were not aware of the fact, even though June 12th. Now, June 12th, that's just a week ago yesterday. Tell me what I'm missing here. Because you authored an endorsement for an attorney named Raquel Lee Bellamy on June 12th. So were you not aware that your AVO resume listed that you were currently a legal advisor to Workers' Dignity?
Senator, I believe it's been more than a decade since I looked at my AVO profile, and so I was not aware that it said that.
More than a decade or more than a week? Which one?
I have not looked at it. Are you suggesting June 12th of this year?
Yes. Yes.
No, that is incorrect, Senator.
Okay, but you can't tell us when it ended. You haven't told us really when it began or when it ended. A minute ago, you didn't acknowledge to Mr. Grassley what was going on, so I'm a little confused. I'm about to be gavelled out. I'm out of time, but this raises some questions. It also raises some questions. Your largest political campaign donation went to someone who has made blatantly racist comments and really wildly inappropriate comments about almost every member of this committee, and I find that troubling.
Thanks. Can I, first of all, welcome. Glad you're here.
Judge Lopez, I'm going to quickly note there's a reason the Democrats have scheduled you on this panel, because you have a long pattern of sentencing criminal defendants to egregiously light sentences, including one child molester who molested a 4-year-old and 9-year-old, and you sentenced him to only 6 years in prison, including, as we heard before, one woman who was responsible for killing her 1-year-old son, who was coated in fentanyl. His pajamas were coated in fentanyl. His sheets were coated in fentanyl. You could have sentenced her to 30 years. You sentenced her to only 4 years. It's an egregious pattern, but the reason you're put on this panel is the Democrats know that most Republicans will not have time to question you about that terrible record, because your colleague on this panel, her record is even worse. Ms. Campbell, I will say I have seen some astonishing nominees from this administration, but I have to admit your record takes the cake. A judge should not be a political activist. Your record demonstrates to me a long history of being a political activist, but not just an activist who affiliates with extreme and radical organizations. Now, when Senator Grassley asked you about the Workers' Dignity Organization, you gave, I think, deliberately misleading answer. You said you did not represent them, and that convinced Senator Grassley not to continue on that line of questioning. You have been a legal advisor to that organization since 2013. That is what you have publicly printed on your AVO biography. It is what has been described in the Tennessee Bar Association when you were nominated. That explicitly says she served as a legal advisor for local workers' rights nonprofit Workers' Dignity. Now, why is it you're distancing yourself from them? The reason is because they are utterly radical. If you look at this group that you've served as the legal advisor for over a decade, this is an openly Marxist organization. This is a communist organization. Now, those words are not said lightly. According to their own characterization of their views, this group says there's no election outcome that improves conditions for workers. The laws of this country have never worked for our people, and now that the system is crumbling, we will continue to stand in community and solidarity with each other. The only way we win in a world we deserve is by building a multiracial working class revolution that can push out white nationalism, violent state racism, and the capitalist class that is desperately clutching to hold control and profits as the people rise up. Why have you spent a decade as a legal advisor to an openly communist and Marxist organization? I don't think your microphone's on.
I apologize, Senator. If I could briefly clarify, more than a decade ago, probably for the course of 2 or 3 years, I served on an advisory board that helped this, at the time, was supposed to be a nonprofit workers' rights organization get set up and get started.
Did you know they were a communist organization?
Senator, at that time, they did not express these kinds of views. It was an organization.
So this is new. This wasn't the case then.
Yes, and I have not been affiliated with them in more than a decade.
You're aware that your current profile that you have up, your legal bio, says you are right now an advisor to them.
I apologize for any confusion about that.
So your testimony under oath, and that's all right, the facts will come out, but your testimony, I want to make it explicit. Your testimony under oath is that you have done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long?
I have not served on their advisory board for
You've done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long? Please answer the question.
many, many years.
How many?
I don't know sitting here today. It's been many
Okay,
years.
if you look at other statements from this organization, because they are radicals. They are radicals. If you look also, this is the same group in 2020. They called for abolishing ICE, abolishing prisons and detention centers, and abolishing the police. Why did you volunteer for a communist organization that calls for abolishing ICE and abolishing the police?
Senator, I have never seen these comments before.
You didn't know who you were volunteering for?
I was not a volunteer for them at that
You were a legal advisor. Were you paid?
No, I was
Then
not.
you were a volunteer. If you volunteered to be a legal advisor, you were a volunteer. Why did you volunteer? Do you support abolishing ICE?
Senator, at this time, I had...
Do you support abolishing ICE?
I do not, Senator.
Well, it's amazing because a minute ago you also told Senator Graham that the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition that has a manifesto calling for abolishing ICE, you said you had nothing to do with it, which is fairly astonishing because on page 3 of their manifesto, they thank you by name for what they say. We would like to thank the following individuals and organizations for their thoughtful feedback and input. This platform would not have been possible without their expertise. Are they lying?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that manifesto.
Are they lying? Did you provide any assistance? Did you give feedback and input, which is what they say on the cover page?
Senator, I didn't even know that existed, and so no, I did not provide input on it.
Eddie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Campbell, you lied to Senator Grassley, didn't you?
No, Senator.
You told Senator Grassley that you've never represented workers' dignity, didn't you?
That is correct, Senator.
That's not true, is it?
Senator, I have never represented that organization.
Yes, ma'am. That's not true, is it?
Senator, it is true. I served for a period of 2 or 3 years, more than a decade ago, on an advisory board to help them set up as a nonprofit.
In fact, you were so supportive of workers' dignity that not only did you represent them, you didn't charge them a fee. Isn't that correct?
Senator, when I was on their advisory board more than a decade ago, I did volunteer my time.
Right. You know what this is? Do you recognize that picture?
No, Senator.
This is from Workers' Dignity's website. There you are, right here. It's got your name. Wow. Judge Lopez, you
has made such statements. And let me ask you, go back to the workers' dignity, that work that you've done. Do you agree with them on abolishing law enforcement, abolishing ICE?
Senator, I'm not familiar with those statements, but I can categorically say to you that I disagree with those positions.
So you would not abolish ICE. Okay. The Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, and we have discussed this, and you're saying, I want you to say this for the record, so you are saying that they are lying when they say that you gave them advice and consent and help. Is that correct?
Senator, the manifesto that was referenced, I am not familiar with it.
So why would they think that they had depended on you for advice? And why would they note this? Did you ask them about it? Did you say, why are you referencing me and I had nothing to do with this? Did you talk to anyone?
Senator, until today, I did not know that my name was listed in one of their publications.
You had no idea about that. Well, do you agree with them? And I'm pulling this from a Fox 17 news report. TIRRC is calling on Metro Police to develop clear policies and refuse to help ICE carry out civil immigration enforcement in Davidson County. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that statement, and no, I don't agree with it.
You don't agree. Thank you.
I'm trying to understand your answers to this committee. Let's start with the workers' dignity question, because your truthfulness under oath is surely, I notice my friends across the way now are utterly uninterested in any organization you've been a part of. They're suddenly utterly uninterested in things you wrote in the past. They're utterly uninterested in who you give money to. That wasn't the case just a few years ago, but be that as it may, surely they're interested in your truthfulness. I have now counted, just as I've sat here today, 4 separate answers by you, all of them conflicting as to what exactly was your relationship with workers' dignity. So let's just get this nailed down. First of all, did you disclose your relationship with workers' dignity to this committee? Don't look at the chairman, look at me.
I'm not sure that I included that. I don't remember, Senator.
Oh, I think you do. The answer is no. You did not disclose it to this committee. Then you told Senator Grassley, I've never represented that group. Then you told Senator Lee, next, that you had indeed advised them, and that you'd advise them as a member of a legal advisory board. You said 10 years ago, right? Then you told Senator Cruz that, in fact, you told Senator Lee you'd advise them briefly. You told Senator Cruz, actually, you'd advise them for 3 years. Then you told Senator Durbin that it wasn't 10 years ago, it was 15 years ago. So what is it exactly? You didn't disclose your association with this radical group to the committee. You're currently listed now, your own bio lists you as a legal advisor to the Workers' Dignity Group from 2013 to the present. To the present. The Tennessee Bar Association cited your work with this group for your nomination. So what is the story? When did you start working for Workers' Dignity?
Senator, more than a decade ago, for 2 or 3 years, I served on a legal advisory committee or board.
So you gave them legal advice.
We were helping them set up as a nonprofit.
So you represented them. So you lied to Senator Grassley earlier when he explicitly asked you, did you do any legal work? And you said no.
Senator,
in fact, you served on a legal advisory board. That's your testimony now. Correct?
Senator, I served on this board.
On a legal advisory board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you lied to Senator Grassley here under oath. What else have you lied about? Workers' Dignity has condemned Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestine. They have said that Israel is engaged in ethnic cleansing. Do you agree with that?
No, Senator.
How can I believe you? You just lied under oath a moment ago to Senator Grassley. You've lied to us up and down on this committee. I mean, this is a serious problem, Ms. Campbell. I have to say, I've never seen a witness, never, in 5 years in this committee, sit here and lie to us and change the story person to person. Why are you doing it? What is it? Why are you afraid to tell the truth about workers' dignity? Why have you lied to this committee? Why didn't you disclose it? Why did you lie to Senator Grassley? Why have you changed your story every time you're asked?
Senator, I have not lied to you today. I've tried to represent my participation with this group.
What you've done is you've misrepresented your participation with this group. You apologize to Senator Cruz for any confusion. You've created the confusion. Deliberately. Deliberately. Let's talk about I'm trying to understand your answers to this committee. Let's start with the workers' dignity question, because your truthfulness under oath is surely, I notice my friends across the way now are utterly uninterested in any organization you've been a part of. They're suddenly utterly uninterested in things you wrote in the past. They're utterly uninterested in who you give money to. That wasn't the case just a few years ago, but be that as it may, surely they're interested in your truthfulness. I have now counted, just as I've sat here today, 4 separate answers by you, all of them conflicting as to what exactly was your relationship with workers' dignity. So let's just get this nailed down. First of all, did you disclose your relationship with Workers' Dignity to this committee? Don't look at the chairman, look at me.
I'm not sure that I included that. I don't remember, Senator.
Oh, I think you do. The answer is no. You did not disclose it to this committee. Then you told Senator Grassley, I've never represented that group. Then you told Senator Lee, next, that you had indeed advised them, and that you'd advised them as a member of a legal advisory board. You said 10 years ago, right? Then you told Senator Cruz that, in fact, you told Senator Lee you'd advised them briefly. You told Senator Cruz, actually, you'd advised them for 3 years. Then you told Senator Durbin that it wasn't 10 years ago, it was 15 years ago. So what is it exactly? You didn't disclose your association with this radical group to the committee. You're currently listed now, your own bio lists you as a legal advisor to the Workers' Dignity Group from 2013 to the present. To the present. The Tennessee Bar Association cited your work with this group for your nomination. So what is the story? When did you start working for Workers' Dignity?
Senator, more than a decade ago, for 2 or 3 years, I served on a legal advisory committee or board.
So you gave them legal advice.
We were helping them set up as a nonprofit.
So you represented them. So you lied to Senator Grassley earlier when he explicitly asked you, did you do any legal work? And you said no.
Senator,
in fact, you served on a legal advisory board. That's your testimony now. Correct?
Senator, I served on this board.
On a legal advisory board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you lied to Senator Grassley here under oath. What else have you lied about? Workers' Dignity has condemned Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestine. They have said that Israel is engaged in ethnic cleansing. Do you agree with that?
No, Senator.
How can I believe you? You just lied under oath a moment ago to Senator Grassley. You've lied to us up and down on this committee. I mean, this is a serious problem, Ms. Campbell. I have to say, I've never seen a witness, never, in 5 years in this committee, sit here and lie to us and change the story person to person. Why are you doing it? What is it? Why are you afraid to tell the truth about Workers' Dignity? Why have you lied to this committee? Why didn't you disclose it? Why did you lie to Senator Grassley? Why have you changed your story every time you're asked?
Senator, I have not lied to you today. I've tried to represent my participation with this group.
What you've done is you've misrepresented your participation with this group. You apologize to Senator Cruz for any confusion. You've created the confusion. Deliberately. Deliberately. Let's talk about something else that you've created confusion for. The biggest political donation that you have ever made is to Odessa Kelly, this radical candidate who said that members of this committee are Satanists, who endorsed violence. Why did you give money to Odessa Kelly? Over $1,000. I mean, that's not nothing. That may be nothing to you. That's not nothing to most people. Why did you give money, the most money you've ever given, to this person?
Senator, Miss Kelly lives in my neighborhood. She's one of my neighbors.
And you agreed with her views?
No, on those views that you've read, I don't agree with them.
Oh, I haven't read any of them. I'm just asking you. Do you agree with her views? I mean, you gave her more money than anybody else. Your governor, your state senator, your attorney general, you gave her the most.
I do not agree with all of her views, no, Senator.
Well, which ones do you agree with? Can you name one?
Senator, I know that she is my neighbor, and I'm a neighborly person.
Oh, I see. You're a neighborly person. Well, I tell you this. You have represented to this committee that you didn't know what Odessa Kelly said and the frankly outrageous things that she said and did. You said you didn't know anything about Workers' Dignity. You lied to us about your association with that group. You said you didn't know anything about the Tennessee, the Tennessee Immigrant Refugee Rights Coalition, who thanks you personally in their introduction. You said you didn't know anything about that. I mean, either all of these people are liars or you are, Ms. Campbell. It's one or the other. It's quite a pattern. Maybe they all are. But given what you've told us under oath today, I think the answer is you are. And for that reason, you are utterly unqualified to sit on the federal bench.
Senator's time has expired. Thank you, Ms. Campbell, and thank you, Judge Lopez. Your